In the story of American wealth, New York stands as the ultimate proving ground, where fortunes rise and fall like tides against Manhattan's shores. But beneath the gleaming surface of success lies a deeper tale, the story of families who transformed wealth into enduring power. Through economic upheavals, social revolutions, and the constant churn of new money, these dynasties shaped the very architecture of American society. Their world revolved around something far more elusive than business empires or industrial might. They mastered the art of turning gold into social currency. Today, we examine how in their hands, New York City became more than a financial hub. It evolved into a sophisticated social laboratory where they defined the rules of status and influence. The year, 1848. The locale, New York City, humming with life, yet the Astor mansion stood in a cold contrast, its aura of regality offering a muted hush. John Jacob Astor, his legendary family's first magnate, lay on his bed, life flickering like a dying candle. The bed, resplendent in silk and rich mahogany, was an ironic setting for a man who began his journey in the ruggedness of Waldorf, Germany, and the son of a simple butcher. His saga, powered by a monumental spirit, led him across the Atlantic, driven by dreams too large for his small German hamlet. From fixing musical instrumentals to peddling fur, from dabbling in fledgling real estate to mastering finance, he embroidered his success into the fabric of a new world, weaving a legacy in golden threads. Now his son William stood sentinel at his bedside, eyes hard, matching his father's steel. An understanding passed between them, as silent as the room, and as profound as the coming inheritance. "Make it grow, William," the old Astor rasped, a lifetime of victories and struggles faintly echoing in his voice. Yet little did he know that his earthly departure would not mark the end of an era, but the beginning. It would be not only an immense fortune he passed on to his son William, but the seeds of a transatlantic empire. In today's video at Old Money Luxury, we shall recount the incredible true life story of the Astors, America's first old money family, from the dusty roads of rural Germany to the hallowed halls of Westminster to the affluent avenues of the city that never sleeps. So settle in and join us as we describe how the Astor family went from new money to old money. In the rural enclave of Waldorf, nestled near the regal city of Heidelberg, now part of contemporary Baden-Württemberg, Germany, a son was welcomed into the world in 1763. The newborn, christened John Jacob Astor, was the youngest scion of Johann Jacob Astor, a humble butcher, and Maria Magdalena von Berg. At the tender age of 16, John Jacob departed his home for the bustling city of London, where he fell under the tutelage of his uncle in the art of crafting musical instruments. Our lovely English capital, in its grandeur, not only provided Astor with proficiency in English, but also a robust apprenticeship in the realm of commerce. The year 1784 marked Astor's embarkation to the United States, his pockets filled with little more than hopes and a collection of several flutes for sale. He chose New York City as his new home, where he opened a small but ambitious shop trading in furs. The 1794 Jay Treaty, which allowed Americans to trade in Canada, served as a catalyst from which to build the empire that would come to create America's first old money family. By the turn of the century, Jacob had accumulated a fortune of $6 million, an eye-watering amount of wealth for an era where America was less than 20 years old and reigned as the luminary of the fur trade. He then diversified his portfolio, trading furs for Chinese tea and investing in Manhattan's burgeoning real estate market, becoming a notable figure in fur transactions in China. Additionally, John Jacob's brother Henry, an enthusiast of equine racing and a German immigrant like himself, purchased a thoroughbred messenger who had journeyed from England to America in 1788. This noble steed would sire all standard-bred horses in America, adding a unique chapter to the Astor family legacy. Now, the demise of Meriwether Lewis in 1809 ignited a quest for an able governor for the area. Astor saw an opportunity, proposing a daring plan to monopolize and extend the fur trade to the Pacific. His venture employed Wilson Price Hunt, a St. Louis businessman, to lead an overland expedition to the Columbia River. The journey, though fraught with disastrous decisions, inadvertently led to seminal discoveries and paved the path known today as the Oregon Trail. This venture formed the bedrock for American development of Oregon and Washington. You see, Astor's empire held a near monopoly on the fur trade, and by the 1820s it stood as one of the largest enterprises in the nascent United States. Yet, by 1834, the illustrious Astor exited the company he had built, partially due to a shift in fashion trends leading to the decline of fur's popularity, causing the company to fragment. However, by then, Astor had already acquired the title of America's very first multimillionaire and the world's richest man. Now, John Jacob Astor's demise on the 29th of March 1848 marked the end of an era. With a fortune worth a staggering $20 million, Astor passed as the richest person in America. To give a perspective on how wildly large this fortune was in today's terms, if we compare Astor's wealth to the gross national product of America at that time, his net worth would be similar to a 2023 sum of $121 billion, competing with only the likes of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk on the world stage. And John Jacob's penchant for philanthropy was equally illustrious, dedicating $400,000 from his coffers to the establishment of the Astor Library, the esteemed institution that would later coalesce with the Lenox Library to become the iconic New York Public Library. Now, his firstborn son, John Jr., from birth, was plagued by a disheartening blend of ill health and mental issues, thus leading to John Jacob's will giving him an allowance just adequate to assure his sustenance in the uncertain times ahead. Therefore, the lion's share of the Astors' immense wealth, coupled with the destiny of their family empire, was bestowed upon the capable shoulders of his second son, William, thus positioning the next move on the grand chessboard towards old money dominance the Astor family would play in this game of familial intrigue. Now, William Backhouse Astor Sr., named after William Backhouse, his father's merchant friend, over the course of his life would prove his mettle as a competent associate in his father's prosperous export enterprise, all while carefully injecting capital into Manhattan's fertile soil of real estate. Emboldened by his family's already legendary business reputation, William amplified the empire's real estate portfolio, erecting over 700 stores and homes in the growing New York City. His real estate ventures around Central Park yielded exponential growth for the family assets. Understand, William, an astute operator himself, not merely preserved, but managed to multiply the Astor family fortune. His diligent endeavors led to even more prosperity for their lineage, his legacy culminating in a staggering estate valued at nearly $50 million. It was as though Midas himself had passed his golden touch onto the next Astors, and they wielded this gift with expert precision. However, in the long arc of family law, the most crucial move William made was a defining characteristic of old money dynasties: strategic intermarriage. On the 20th day of May in the year 1818, he took the hand of Miss Margaret Alida Rebecca Armstrong, the children of Senator John Armstrong Jr. and Elida, sister to Horatio Gates Armstrong. From her mother's side, she claimed lineage from the renowned Livingston clan, her own mother the youngest offspring of the eminent Judge Robert Livingston and his wife Margaret. Furthermore, her pedigree included such luminaries as Founding Father Robert R. Livingston and Secretary of State Edward Livingston. On the other side, her father, John Armstrong Jr., held the distinguished title of President James Madison's second Secretary of War. From this impressive brood, William and Margaret's offspring would include a shockingly impressive third generation of Astors to steer their colossal empire. John Jacob Astor III, born during a balmy summer's day on the 10th of June in 1822, would thrive as an American financier, generous benefactor, and a soldier in the American Civil War. His extraordinary business acumen served to bolster his personal fortune, much like his father and grandfather, eventually earning him the title of the richest amongst the Astor lineage from his generation. By the end of his reign, he would come to grow the family coffers to a stratospheric range between $75 million and $100 million, around 2.5 to 3.5 billion in today's dollars. Though again, we must remember that this was a time when the US had a much lower GDP than we have today, thus indicating that $3 billion back then may be closer to 80 or 90 billion relative to today's economies. John III's proudest achievement, however, lay in the establishment of the English branch of the Astor dynasty. It was this branch that cemented the Astor name amongst the British nobility, an enduring legacy that even to this day continues to take pride of place in the aristocratic circles, and we'll cover more in a minute. Now, William and Margaret's daughter, Laura Eugenia Astor, born in 1824, married to a man by the soon-to-be conspicuously American name of Franklin Hughes Delano on the 17th of September, 1844. This unforeseen twist of destiny would link the Astors with another echelon of the closest thing America has to royalty, the Roosevelts. Franklin Hughes was, after all, the namesake of a certain US president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This union also reinforced the Astors' ties with America's founding stock, given Franklin Hughes Delano's lineage traced back to Philip Delano, a pilgrim who set foot in Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1621. Our tale now settles upon William Astor Jr., the bearing carrier of his forefathers' illustrious American legacy. Yet it was actually his wife, the imposing Caroline Schermerhorn, who would seize the reins of New York's elite, sculpting the bedrock of its high society. Born to the privileged echelons of New York's Dutch aristocracy on September 22, 1830, Caroline, or Lina as she was affectionately known, was a Schermerhorn, offspring of the city's earliest settlers. Her father, Abraham Schermerhorn, had made his fortune in shipping and possessed a net worth of $500,000, a significant sum for the time, equivalent to $13.74 million today. Helen Van Cortlandt, née White, of the prominent Schermerhorns, was her mother. Fate entwined Caroline Schermerhorn and William Astor Jr., the grandson of John Jacob Astor, in a harmonious union in 1853. An intriguing piece of history unfolded in 1862 when the couple commissioned a fashionable four-bay brownstone townhouse at 355th Avenue, an address that would later be home to none other than the Empire State Building. Now, contrary to popular perception that she was always more focused on high society than family, Mrs. Astor, for a considerable part of her years as a mother of young children, devoted herself to her family and household management. Additionally, a hefty inheritance from her parents afforded her a level of financial independence uncharacteristic for women of her era. As the years passed, Caroline Astor's sphere of influence, aptly known as the 400, emerged as a cornerstone of New York's Gilded Age society. You see, the city's population had swelled dramatically post-Civil War, with wealthy migrants and immigrants challenging the traditional stronghold of the New York elite. Teaming up with the revered social arbitrator, Ward McAllister, a kin of Samuel Cutler Ward, who had joined the Astor clan through marriage, Mrs. Astor began to shape the rules of decorum and select the acceptable newcomers to their esteemed circles. McAllister famously claimed that amidst the grandeur of Gilded Age New York, a mere 400 could truly qualify as members of fashionable society. The Queen of Society, as she came to be known, Mrs. Astor solidified her exclusive circle by throwing a grand annual ball on the third Monday of January. Scoring an invitation was seen as the ultimate accolade, the golden ticket confirming one's place within the glittering edifice of New York society. Caroline Astor during this era was renowned for her impeccable grace, scrupulous discretion, and a tongue that never courted controversy. Her amicable demeanor belied a certain detachment. She was never one for unsolicited intimacy, nor was she given to sharing confidences. Her social sphere was rigid, an unassailable bastion of old money, steadfastly unyielding in the maelstrom of changing times and values. Yet for all their staunch traditionalism, the Astors' fame reached far beyond their native shores, their names synonymous with the crème de la crème of the elite. The press found themselves inexplicably drawn to their lives, the grandeur, the scandals, case in point, the affair of Lady Caroline's attires. Much to the delight of the international press, Caroline Astor's sumptuous gowns, intricately adorned with apple green silk, velvet, and ostentatious ostrich feathers, were intercepted by government agents under the suspicion of luxury duty evasion. Months of speculation followed as the world pondered whether Astor would capitulate to the looming charges of $300 to $400. Lady Astor remained adamantly defiant, and, in the end, her gowns were put to auction. Curiously enough, it could be suggested that the Astors meticulously manufactured their connotation as old money, cleverly maneuvering the public's perception of older groups as new money. The quintessential example of this was their complex dynamic with the Vanderbilts. The Vanderbilts, a family known for wealth amassed rather than inherited, represented a form of opulence that the Astors found rather gauche and nouveau riche, particularly railroad money, which was distasteful in the eyes of Mrs. Astor. As such, she found herself reluctant to entertain the Vanderbilt daughters. Yet, in 1883, she felt compelled to formally acknowledge the socially prominent Alva Erskine Smith, spouse of William Kissam Vanderbilt, granting the Vanderbilts access to the upper echelons of society. A popular tale swirling around the high society circles tells of Alva Vanderbilt orchestrating an opulent costume ball at her residence, yet depriving young Caroline Astor, Lena's youngest, of her participation, as Mrs. Astor had not extended a formal call. Observing the Vanderbilts' ascent, Lady Astor, foreseeing the strategic advantage of their alliance in maintaining the exclusivity of New York's high society, extended an olive branch and attended Alva's grand ball. Thereafter, the Vanderbilts were graced with invitations to Lady Astor's annual soiree, symbolizing their official ascension into New York's high society. For our more riveting and detailed account of the Vanderbilts' dramatic rise, fall, and subsequent resurrection, click the video on screen or visit the video description box, and we'll guide you through that immense saga. Now, after the demise of the indomitable Lady Astor, the role of reigning queen of New York society was a mantle too weighty for one woman. The responsibility fell upon the heavy shoulders of three ladies of prestige: Marion Graves Anthon Fish, the genteel wife of Stuyvesant Fish; Theresa Fair Ulrichs, the glamorous spouse of Herman Ulrichs; and Alva Belmont, who had found a new companion in Oliver Belmont. In this same circle of power and affluence, Mrs. Astor's son, John Jacob Astor IV, a businessman of extraordinary prowess, writer, military officer in the Spanish-American War, sadly breathed his last in the calamitous sinking of the Titanic. With an estate valuing approximately $87 million, a fortune that would be the equivalent of $2.64 billion today, Astor was the wealthiest among the unfortunate souls on the ill-fated voyage, and arguably one of the world's richest men during his time. At the same time, on the other side of the pond, the Astor lineage grew nobler, cultivating its prestige through the illustrious titles of Viscount Astor and Baron Astor of Hever. First, a wealthy American Astor by the name of William Waldorf Astor took the bold step of transplanting himself to the British soils in 1891, later adopting the mantle of British citizenry in 1899. As a mark of his sterling contribution to the wartime charities, he was awarded a baronage in 1916 and elevated to a viscount a year later. Thus was the birth of the Viscount Astor, granted by the peerage of the United Kingdom on a summer afternoon in 1917, forever intertwining the Astors with the annals of British nobility. In the mid-century year of 1956, another title was fashioned within the peerage of the United Kingdom. This was the title of Baron Astor of Hever, awarded to the influential newspaper baron and conservative politician, another John Jacob Astor, the fourth offspring of William Waldorf Astor, first Viscount Astor. In today's world, certain Astor descendants, such as William Astor, fourth Viscount Astor, persist in wielding their influence, notably in the British House of Lords. However, the family fortune has been eroded over time, with certain heirs grappling with monetary hardships. One poignant symbol of this decline is the family's 420-acre estate, now wearing the signs of neglect due to insufficient maintenance funds. Thus, the Astor name, once synonymous with America's affluent uppermost echelons, has faced a gradual diminution in its prestige. While their mark on New York City's panorama and the American milieu remains indelible, their once venerated status has taken a quiet retreat. Yet for all their dwindling wealth and influence, the Astor lineage has left an indelible legacy on the city that never sleeps. The cityscape is peppered with edifices bearing the Astor insignia, including many streets, buildings, and companies. Institutions like the modern St. Regis Hotel and the Astor, alongside various other landmarks, indeed echo their erstwhile glory. Therefore, the story of the Astor family's evolution from new money to old money serves as a potent reminder of both the importance of diversification and the transience of time and success. No matter what heights of success you reach, And, for what it's worth, the name Astor will always hold weight in the Western world. Peering through an oppressive cloak of fog during the somber twilight hours of New York City in the year 1947, there looms an imposing spectre, the decaying Vanderbilt Triple Palace. Once a shining beacon of grandeur and prosperity, it now echoes with the hushed whispers of a forgotten splendor. In its heyday, the palace glistened like a diamond under the opulent glow of gaslit chandeliers. Rooms were decked with European art, while gilded mirrors reflected the refined tastes of the era's elite. The echoes of laughter, clinking crystal, and impassioned debates filled the grand halls, all bearing testimony to the meteoric rise of the Vanderbilt dynasty. However, the current visage of the Triple Palace was an unnerving contrast. Its decadent opulence had faded, traded for an ominous air of dereliction. The silent corridors now reeked of neglect and abandonment. The imposing structure that epitomized luxury now bore the scars of time and indifference, a granite edifice teetering on the brink of oblivion. Pondering such a heart-wrenching image, one might ask, how did this majestic empire collapse, surrendering its palatial grandeur to time's merciless grasp? Join us on this intriguing journey to answer your query, as we embark on an expedition to once and for all explain how the Vanderbilt family went from old money to no money. The dawn of the 19th century unveiled a new titan in the American commercial narrative, a man by the name of Cornelius Vanderbilt, affectionately known as the Commodore. His tale opens in the rugged setting of Staten Island, New York, in 1794. Birthed forth in a lineage of 9, young Cornelius was cast in the forge of humility, born into an environment of limited means. Looking back through history, the seeds of the Vanderbilt legacy can be traced to De Bilt, nestled in the heart of Utrecht, Netherlands. Here, Jan Aertsen, Cornelius's great-great-great-grandfather, and a humble Dutch farmer, sought a new life in New Amsterdam, the city that would eventually bear the name New York. In an amazing twist of fate, this ancestor of one of America's wealthiest dynasties came to the New World not only penniless, but was forced into indentured servitude upon his arrival in 1650. However, his back-breaking work would turn out to be the sacrifice that set the Vanderbilt legacy in motion. His village name, suffixed by the Dutch Vander, translated to "of the built," eventually morphed over generations into the weighty name of Vanderbilt. Now, the inception of Cornelius's empire was marked at the tender age of 16, as he gambled on a ferry service operation between Staten Island and Manhattan, funded by a loan of $100 from his mother. This modest venture bloomed into a colossal fortune exceeding $100 million, a staggering sum that today's standards would value over $200 billion. Cornelius Vanderbilt, a figure cast in the mold of determination and intelligence, etched his path to prosperity through an inexhaustible work ethic and shrewd business maneuvering. His simple ferry service expanded its reach during the tumultuous times of the War of 1812, serving the far-flung government outposts strewn around New York City. As peace was restored, Vanderbilt shifted his sights to the steamship industry, aligning himself with the strategic acumen of Thomas Gibbons. Possessing an innate radar for identifying opportunities within fledgling markets, Vanderbilt seized control of the steamboat and nascent railroad industries, effectively transforming the American landscape. In particular, his strategic mastery lay in his ability to grow markets, outmaneuvering competition through offering accessible prices and exploring untapped territories. He built his businesses on the burgeoning pillars of customer satisfaction, efficiency, frugality, and uncompromising consequences for dishonesty or idleness. And even better, this agile titan was no stranger to industry evolution. His adaptability became evident when he smoothly transitioned from steamboats to railroads. Not merely content with business savvy, Vanderbilt was also a ruthless competitor, infamous for his aggressive tactics in obliterating competition. And with regard to his temperament, as a man of few words, Vanderbilt was esteemed for his impeccable judgment of character. He often remained stoic in the face of criticism, steadfast in his decisions, his unyielding determination and adaptability. This drive allowed him to amass a formidable fortune, crowning him as one of the wealthiest Americans of the 19th century. In fact, his lifestyle could be described as having an even Spartan-like frugality, a trait inherited from his mother. This very deliberate lifestyle choice marked him as an outlier, creating a tangible rift between himself and the glittering upper echelons of high society. Yet, unbeknownst to the Commodore, a dramatic shift loomed on the horizon. His descendants, heirs to the Vanderbilt fortune, would cast away their patriarch's doctrine of frugality. They instead embraced a life dripping with extravagance and opulence, casting aside the lessons of their forebear and eventually, as the kids today would say, fumbling the bag. You see, their actions would signal a stark departure from Cornelius's principles, setting the stage for a story of epic downfall and squandered wealth. A tale as grand as their inheritance, filled with missteps, excesses, and lavish spending that would threaten the very existence of the Vanderbilt fortune. With the arsenal of family lineage and robust wealth at their disposal, one could imagine the Vanderbilts flourishing as an enduring emblem of American old money. Yet, in an unexpected twist of fate, Cornelius Vanderbilt's descendants took a nosedive into the realms of opulence and luxurious excess. The precursor to this ill-fated journey was William Henry Vanderbilt, Cornelius's son. Despite his pedigree, he failed to instill the old money ethos into his 8 offspring, arguably raising several who were, alas, spoiled brats beyond measure. In his personal life, William managed to amass an estate worth $200 million by the time of his demise in 1885, doubling his father's empire. However, whispers of his volatile temperament and emotional inconsistency cast a shadow over his accomplishments, and likely hint at how he would come to raise a generation of intemperate progeny. Early anecdotes recount tales reminiscent of HBO's Succession, portraying the relationship between William and his father, Cornelius, akin to that of Logan Roy and Kendall Roy. Cornelius, often frustrated with his eldest son, called him a blockhead and blatherskite. William yearned to prove otherwise, but lacked the courage to face the Commodore's censure. However, a turning point arrived during a family voyage to Europe aboard the steamship Vanderbilt in 1860. Following this trip, father and son grew closer, and William assumed an increasingly integral role in the Vanderbilt business empire. Yet, once at the helm, William's unpredictable nature became a public nuisance. One incident in particular occurred in 1883, when journalist John Dickinson Sherman questioned him about his operation of the limited express train service. One incident in particular occurred in 1883. To a question about whether the trains were run for public convenience, William retorted, "The public be damned." This outburst reflected the growing detachment of the Vanderbilt lineage from the principles of their patriarch. Upon the demise of William Henry Vanderbilt, the family's financial leviathan passed into the hands of his sons, Cornelius Vanderbilt II and William Kissam Vanderbilt. This heralded a new era in the dynasty's narrative, one marked by an increasingly convoluted distribution of wealth. The vast Vanderbilt fortune, once a concentrated reservoir of wealth, began to spread thin across an ever-growing family tree. With each passing generation, the inheritance split among a growing number of descendants. As family branches multiplied, the division of assets exacerbated, gradually diluting the individual shares of the once enormous family wealth. Simultaneously, the formidable grasp of inheritance taxes began to gnaw at the edges of the family's fortune. As one generation passed and handed down their wealth to the next, each transfer was met with sizable tax implications. Over time, these seemingly harmless nibbles transformed into significant bites out of the family coffers. The shadow of such financial burdens grew longer with each subsequent generation, steadily eroding the formidable Vanderbilt fortune. Worse still, the family was plagued by a series of reckless financial choices. Much of the Vanderbilt progeny, far removed from the industrious ethos of their forebear, failed to demonstrate the same business acumen and financial prudence that Cornelius Vanderbilt had once embodied. High-risk ventures, failed investments, and a lack of interest in nurturing the family's business interests dealt a series of devastating blows to their wealth. Compounding this was their inclination towards a luxurious lifestyle. Unlike the Commodore, the descendants reveled in extravagance and opulence. They spent prodigiously, indulging in grand mansions, ostentatious parties, and lavish art collections. Such unrestrained spending only served to accelerate the decline of the once mighty Vanderbilt fortune. This combination of expanding family size, punishing inheritance taxes, imprudent financial decisions, and unabated spending cast a foreboding shadow over the Vanderbilt dynasty. The fortune, once a titan in the annals of American wealth, gradually began its descent into oblivion. By the mid-20th century, the Vanderbilt star had considerably dimmed in the American public sphere, as evidenced by the fate of their grand Fifth Avenue mansions, many of which were sold, demolished, or repurposed as museums. A mere 30 years post Cornelius Vanderbilt's death, not a single Vanderbilt was listed among the wealthiest Americans. Tragically, within half a century of the Commodore's passing, the vast Vanderbilt fortune had entirely evaporated. Now, let us delve deeper into the distinctive factors that precipitated the decline of the Vanderbilt wealth and juxtapose it with a family that, despite amassing wealth during the same era, managed to sustain it through generations. To understand the contrasts, let's first consider a hypothetical scenario. Imagine a dominant figure at the helm of a multi-billion-dollar family empire suddenly succumbing to illness. The CEO, who doesn't belong to the family, has handpicked a COO as his successor. Yet the board remains divided in its support. The company's financial health is waning, prompting board anxieties. Without the board's unanimous backing, exploring alternative CEO candidates becomes imperative. Further convoluting matters is the greenhorn board chair, a family member with another family member and controlling shareholder expecting this chair to ascend as the next CEO. This scenario may seem unusual, but in the world of family-owned businesses, finding a successor is a complex labyrinth. The Vanderbilt family's story mirrors this scenario. The dispersion of their fortune during the third generation corresponded with diminishing family interest in their key asset, the New York Central, coupled with escalating expenses. The Vanderbilts were known for their philanthropy, especially William Keesum Vanderbilt of the third generation, who donated millions to numerous causes. Yet, the dawn of income and estate taxes and the family's incessant spending hastened their wealth's decline. During the initial stages of their wealth accumulation, there was a minimal business regulatory framework, allowing them a free hand in dominating entire industries. The era they thrived in was marked by an absence of income and estate taxes, which meant that the Vanderbilts were able to amass an unimaginable fortune free of governmental restrictions or financial drains. However, as societal norms and governmental policies evolved, the Vanderbilts found themselves facing new challenges. This era also saw an increased regulatory focus on monopolies and business practices, adding another layer of complexity to maintaining and growing their fortune. Further exacerbating this situation was the Great Depression, which wreaked havoc on the American economy. It affected the Vanderbilts' investments and economic interests, leading to a significant downturn in their fortunes. The Rockefeller family, conversely, employed shrewd strategies to safeguard their wealth. John D. Rockefeller's business, via generation-skipping trusts, ensured wealth propagation through the generations. A generation-skipping trust allows the transfer of substantial amounts of money tax-free, skipping a generation, usually passing from the grantor to the grandchildren, rather than the children. In the Rockefellers' case, they managed to retain and multiply their wealth by channeling it down to more distant generations, rather than distributing it among immediate successors. Now, if you'd like to hear more specifics about the Rockefeller family's rags to riches story, be sure to click the video on the right-hand corner of the screen, or visit the video description box below to hear our deep dive on that dynasty's fascinating tale. The Vanderbilts, however, after a few generations, lacked an established core business that could continuously feed wealth into their trust. Their approach primarily involved the passing of assets directly from parent to child in each generation. This strategy not only exposed their wealth to the successive imposition of estate taxes with each generational transfer, but also made their fortune vulnerable to the lavish spending habits of each inheritor. The Rockefellers, by structuring their wealth transfer through a generation-skipping trust, managed to avoid these pitfalls and ensure the long-term preservation of their family's wealth. And what else set the Rockefellers apart? David Rockefeller Jr., chairman of Rockefeller and Company, in a rare interview, spoke of a system of values, traditions, and institutions developed by the family. These mechanisms aided the family in staying united and preserving their wealth, serving as practical tools for any family trying to instill sound monetary values in their children. Remarkably, the Rockefeller family largely remained unified, devoid of public scandals, feuds, lawsuits, or tragedies that typically plague wealthy dynasties. Today, over 250 direct descendants of John D. Rockefeller and Laura Spelman Rockefeller form the family. We meet as a family twice a year, often more than 100 of us in a room for a Christmas lunch, for example, said David Rockefeller. From the age of 21, family members are invited to these gatherings, aptly called the Family Forum. Here they discuss the family's direction, new members, career news, and other significant milestones. They ensure everyone feels part of the family, including those who married into it. Preserving the family history is also deemed essential. The Rockefellers do this through their familial homesteads, places passed down over generations, where they can reconnect with their past. I can go back to the place where my great-grandfather lived over 100 years ago and see how he lived and see how his son and their grandchildren lived, added David Rockefeller. Such practices exemplify the different approaches two similarly wealthy families took to wealth preservation. The Vanderbilt legacy today is a fascinating tale of resilience, adaptation, and lessons learned from the rise and fall of one of America's wealthiest families. Despite the family's difficulties and the decline of their once vast fortune, some members of the Vanderbilt family have managed to create their own paths and leave lasting impressions on society. Gloria Vanderbilt, a descendant of the Vanderbilt family, faced a difficult life marked by personal tragedies and challenges. Born in 1924, she was the daughter of Reginald Claypool Vanderbilt and Gloria Morgan Vanderbilt. At a young age, Gloria was thrust into the spotlight during a highly publicized custody battle between her mother and her paternal aunt, Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney. Despite these early hardships, Gloria went on to become a highly respected and successful artist, fashion designer, and author. Her resilience and determination to forge her own path endeared her to the public and made her a beloved figure. Throughout her life, Gloria Vanderbilt was not only a colorful but also a very successful personality who made many contributions to the society in which she lived and thrived. She was an exceptional, vivacious fashion icon, renowned for her distinctive style and the widely successful Vanderbilts brand. In a fascinating aside, one of our followers at Old Money Luxury shared a personal interaction with Gloria Vanderbilt, recalling, "I met Gloria Vanderbilt at her New York art show in 2003. She was elegant, well-bred, polite, soft-spoken, and greeted me with a big smile on her face. Her hair, makeup, clothes were impeccable and understated. Her teeth and complexion were perfect. I'm so glad I met her. I've read her books. She lived appropriately. She was an iconic figure who needed protection from devious people." At her level of wealth, she had friendships with designers, actors, singers, lawyers, professors, business people with education and talent. She loved her sons deeply. Gloria's sons, Anderson Cooper and Carter Vanderbilt Cooper, also faced their share of challenges growing up as Vanderbilt descendants. Anderson Cooper, a well-known journalist and television personality, has spoken openly about the impact of his family's history on his life and career. He has expressed gratitude for the opportunities his family's legacy has afforded him, while also acknowledging the importance of hard work and self-reliance. Tragically, Carter Vanderbilt Cooper passed by his own hand at the age of 23, a devastating loss for the family. The current financial situation of the Vanderbilt descendants varies, as the once enormous family fortune has been significantly diminished over the years. Many of the family's descendants have pursued careers in various fields, from journalism to fashion, and have built their own wealth and success independent of the family's legacy. The family's remaining assets and lingering influence can still be seen in the form of their historic mansions, such as the Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina, and the Breakers in Newport, Rhode Island. These properties serve as reminders of the family's immense wealth and influence during the Gilded Age and continue to attract visitors from around the world. The rise and fall of the Vanderbilts offers valuable lessons for future generations. The importance of responsible wealth management, strategic estate planning, and the potential pitfalls of excessive spending and poor investment decisions are all evident in the family's story. Additionally, the Vanderbilt legacy serves as a reminder of the importance of resilience and adaptability in the face of adversity. Cleveland, Ohio, on the brink of the 19th century, a collage of hardy souls, undaunted dreams, and fierce determination. It's here, treading through the thunder of steel on rail and the symphony of industry piercing the crisp Midwestern sky, where our story begins. We meet a young John D. Rockefeller, a man not born great, but upon whom greatness would be bestowed by the trials of life. Young John's eyes reflect an old soul, a wisdom gifted by his devout mother, Eliza Davison. A pillar of steadfast religious faith, she has imparted in her son the invaluable lessons of charity, frugality, and financial stewardship. In the muted glow of candlelight, John faithfully absorbed these lessons, his handwritten ledger of daily expenditures a constant companion. However, even as he wrote, his father's shadow filled the room. His father, William Avery Rockefeller, a man with a chameleon-like charm and a penchant for high stakes, peddled his miracle potions. Blending a mix of naive hope and snake oil, he sold dreams to the desperate and unsuspecting. This tension, an intricate waltz between integrity and deception, forms the foundation of the Rockefeller family's destiny. Each moment adds a new layer of resolve. The quiet diligence from a mother's teachings and the ruthless business cunning kindled by a father's guile. Embark with us on this journey from the freshly minted wealth of the new money Rockefellers to the prestigious old money dynasty John would build, as we describe. How the Rockefeller family went from new money to old money. Our saga begins in New York State, where our pivotal protagonist, John D. Rockefeller, first experienced life's trials and triumphs. Raised by his devout Baptist mother, Eliza Davison, Rockefeller learned the virtues of charity, frugality, and the effective management of money from an early age. This foundational training would later become the bedrock of his extraordinary business acumen. However, to fully comprehend the twists and turns of this familial odyssey from rags to riches, we must introduce an almost Dickensian character, John D's father, William Avery Rockefeller. Far from the righteous path his wife trod, William Avery lived a life of flamboyant ruses. As a traveling salesman, he peddled miracle potions with the grand promise of healing any affliction, from insignificant ailments to terminal diseases. Astoundingly, the key ingredient of these elixirs was petroleum, a substance that, unbeknownst to young John, would power his future, paving his way towards becoming America's first billionaire. William Avery, however, bore a less than reputable reputation. He was a man of questionable integrity, dabbling in horse thievery, and habitually tangling with the law. His unorthodox antics eventually led to a forced relocation to Cleveland, Ohio, a move that uprooted young Rockefeller from his childhood home in upstate New York. Eliza Rockefeller, a figure of steadfast faith and resilience, stood as the counterpoint to William Avery's volatile lifestyle. Eliza's devout religiosity played a significant role in shaping young John D. Rockefeller's worldview, infusing his business strategies with a sense of moral responsibility and ethical diligence that would remain with him throughout his life. Now, despite William Avery's dubious character, he surprisingly harbored a staunch belief in the power of education. As such, he enrolled John D. and his brother William at Cleveland's Central High School, the country's first free public high school west of the Allegheny Mountains. This experience instilled a strong sense of independence in John D., particularly during his father's frequent, lengthy absences. And remarkably, these absences were not without their silver lining. When he did indeed return, William Avery's penchant for deception extended to his own son, with John D's father himself once bragging, "I cheat my boys every chance I get. I want to make 'em sharp." This unconventional paternal approach, however, inadvertently honed Rockefeller's business instincts. His early exposure to his father's swindles molded him into a shrewd negotiator, a business hawk with an eagle eye for spotting potential pitfalls and deceptive maneuvers in the commercial arena. The motherly figure of Eliza Davison, however, was the enduring, guiding beacon in John D's life. Over the course of his life, he progressively distanced himself from his father, while his mother's influence and memory only amplified. Her teachings left an indelible mark on Rockefeller, who would go on to recall, "From the beginning, I was trained to work, to save, and to give." Upon completion of his education, Rockefeller, now seasoned with both life and business experience, found his heart's delight in his high school sweetheart, Laura Spellman, marking the close of one eventful chapter and the dawn of another in his remarkable journey. John D. Rockefeller's business journey, one marked by scrupulous financial acumen and towering ambition, began in September 1855, when at just 16 he entered the business world as an assistant bookkeeper for a small produce commission firm, Hewitt and Tuttle in Cleveland. Even then, his meticulous nature shone through, keeping detailed ledgers that accounted for every cent in his possession. A staunch advocate of charity, Rockefeller adhered to the concept of tithing from his earliest days of earning income for himself, committing 10% of his earnings to charitable causes. In 1859, Rockefeller partnered with Morris B. Clark, launching a produce commission business. They raised $4,000, more than $100,000 in today's dollars, a sizable capital for the time. The Civil War period proved lucrative, as the Union Army's demand for supplies soared. However, it was towards the end of the conflict, as the prospect of wartime profits faded, that Rockefeller and Clark turned their attention towards oil refining. The true turning point came in 1866, when John's brother, William Rockefeller Jr., built another refinery in Cleveland, pulling John into the partnership. In 1867, Henry Morrison Flagler joined them, establishing Rockefeller, Andrews and Flagler, which rapidly grew to be the world's largest oil refinery. This operation laid the foundation for Standard Oil, officially formed on January 10, 1870, which embarked on an aggressive campaign to consolidate the oil market. Known as the Cleveland Conquest or the Cleveland Massacre, Standard Oil, in less than 4 months in 1872, absorbed 22 of its 26 Cleveland competitors. By 1880, Standard Oil controlled approximately 90% of all oil refineries and pipelines in the United States, allowing Rockefeller to effectively dictate the entire industry's pace and direction. However, Rockefeller's strategies were not without benefits for the public. Before 1870, only the affluent could afford oil light, provided by expensive whale oil. However, in the following decade, thanks to the economies of scale realized by Standard Oil, kerosene became widely accessible to the working and middle classes. Yet these business practices, including underselling, differential pricing, and secret transportation rebates, also invited controversy. And by 1880, Standard Oil was reported by the media as the most cruel, impudent, pitiless, and grasping monopoly that ever fastened upon a country. The intense criticism led to the creation of the Standard Oil Trust in 1882, a corporation of corporations, to centralize Rockefeller's holdings, which further stirred public suspicion. Despite these challenges, Standard Oil stood resilient, consistently making profits year after year, achieving an aura of invincibility and unparalleled wealth. Ida Tarbell, a journalist, would ultimately lead a movement to challenge this behemoth. Her meticulous investigation, culminating in a series of damning articles, exposed Standard Oil's ruthless tactics and ultimately contributed to the dissolution of Standard Oil as a monopoly, leading to the Clayton Antitrust Act. Without fully throwing in the towel, Rockefeller started looking at his transition into retirement while still seeking to preserve his wealth and transform his new money into the more enduring old money. He diversified his investments and launched the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913 with an initial donation of $100 million, broadening his legacy beyond oil and industry, highlighting his commitment to philanthropy. However, his rise from a new money tycoon to an old money patriarch was marred by personal challenges and public scorn, with some speculating that the relentless scrutiny caused Rockefeller to develop alopecia. Despite these obstacles, the name Rockefeller had a journey from poverty to the patriarch of one of America's most powerful families that was only just beginning as he passed control of his dynasty to the next generation. Now, John D. Rockefeller was not merely an astute businessman, he was also an ardent practitioner of old money principles, such as long-term financial planning, privacy, understated elegance, philanthropy, and thrift. These were the values he instilled in his children, ensuring the Rockefeller legacy would span generations. In contrast to the new money families of the Gilded Age, the Rockefellers adopted a more discreet and sustainable approach to wealth. Consider the Vanderbilt and Gould families, prominent figures of the Gilded Age whom epitomized new money opulence. Cornelius Vanderbilt, renowned for his empire of steamships and the New York Central Railroad, celebrated his fortune with a flourish. The manifestation of his wealth was particularly evident in his family's real estate purchases. The family commissioned grand mansions that showcased their affluence, such as the opulent Vanderbilt mansions on Fifth Avenue, which stood as symbols of their enormous wealth. These included the Triple Palace, a trio of residences designed by famed architects and decorated with marble, gold, and other precious materials. In addition to these residences, Cornelius Vanderbilt II acquired an expensive townhouse on 57th Street, which later had to be sold due to financial strain. Additionally, the Marble House, built by William Kissam Vanderbilt in Newport, Rhode Island, was another display of the Vanderbilt fortune. This lavish mansion, however, was eventually sold due to its exorbitant upkeep costs. Their penchant for grandeur extended to their social events as well, with the Vanderbilt Costume Ball of 1883, a $1 million spectacle, immortalizing their penchant for lavish spending. However, the Vanderbilts' unchecked extravagance, combined with their neglect of long-term financial planning, ultimately led to the erosion of their substantial fortune. This financial mismanagement left many of their descendants grappling with relative poverty, a stark contrast to their forebears' opulence. Similarly, the Gould family, led by railroad magnate Jay Gould, failed to preserve their wealth across generations. Jay Gould was famed for his extravagant lifestyle, evident in his creation of Lyndhurst, a sprawling Gothic revival mansion. His offspring mirrored his extravagance, erecting impressive residences such as a castle-like mansion in Lakewood, New Jersey, and a French chateau-inspired mansion in Tarrytown, New York. However, the Goulds mirrored the Vanderbilts in their lack of emphasis on sustained wealth management. George J. Gould II and Jay Gould II, descendants of this once affluent lineage, pursued commendable careers, yet the family fortune dwindled over time. After George J. Gould's demise, their once formidable wealth had practically evaporated, resulting in their descendants leading lives far from their opulent heritage. Today, the Vanderbilt and Gould legacies serve as potent reminders of the impermanence of wealth without prudent stewardship. The next generation of Rockefellers, however, took a different path, rooted in the old money traditions of privacy, thrift, and philanthropy. These principles played out vividly in the lives of John D. Rockefeller Sr.'s children. John D. Rockefeller Jr., the only son and the primary heir, inherited not only his father's vast fortune, but also his commitment to philanthropy. He financed the construction of the Rockefeller Center in New York and restored colonial Williamsburg, among many other philanthropic endeavors. Yet, despite his eye-watering size of income, he lived a relatively modest lifestyle, avoiding public displays of wealth and maintaining a strong focus on his family. Similarly, Rockefeller's daughters also embodied the old money principles. Elizabeth, the eldest, married a banker and led a private life out of the public eye. Alice, despite suffering from various health issues throughout her life, was known for her philanthropy and carried the family tradition of supporting educational and health causes. Alta, the third child, married a scientist and focused her efforts on supporting scientific research. Edith, the youngest, devoted herself to music and philanthropy, continuing the family's commitment to giving back to society. However, embodying old money principles did not exempt the Rockefeller children from difficulties. John D. Rockefeller Jr., for instance, was often criticized for his ruthless business practices, just like his father. Similarly, Alice struggled with her health, suffering from various illnesses throughout her life. The public scrutiny that came with the Rockefeller name was also a constant source of stress for the family. Yet despite these challenges, the old money principles continued to guide them. The Rockefeller children, following their father's example, sought to preserve their wealth for future generations, focusing on long-term financial planning rather than short-term gain. They understood the importance of privacy, choosing to live away from the public eye. They embraced understated elegance and avoided the ostentatious displays of wealth common among new money families. The financial landscape of America's Gilded Age was indeed a volatile crucible, with fortunes being made and lost almost overnight. Within this climate, a distinction arose between new money, the freshly minted wealth of entrepreneurs and industrialists, and old money, the inherited wealth of established families that had accumulated assets over generations. The terms encapsulated more than just the age of wealth. They signified cultural differences, social acceptability, and the capacity for wealth preservation. The Rockefellers, beginning as new money, were no strangers to this volatility. However, their pragmatic approach to wealth accumulation and preservation arguably allowed them to transition into the esteemed category of old money. Key to this transformation was their ability to integrate into high society and form strategic alliances through marriage. The family made insightful choices in matrimony, aligning themselves with well-established families through advantageous marriages. John D. Rockefeller Jr., the sole son of John D. Rockefeller Sr., set the pace in 1901 when he married Abby Aldrich. Abby wasn't just any bride. She was the daughter of U.S. Senator Nelson W. Aldrich, a political powerhouse whose influence stretched from Wall Street to Washington. The Aldrich family had a strong political lineage, and this marital alliance thrust the Rockefellers into significant political circles, offering them not just social prominence, but also a chance to influence policy. Their progeny, representing the third generation of the Rockefellers, adopted this pattern of strategically beneficial marriages. In 1930, Nelson Rockefeller, later to become the Vice President of the United States, married Mary Todhunter Clark. Mary came from an esteemed Philadelphia family known for its quiet yet significant influence in the city's legal and civic affairs. These unions were not solely about the joining of two individuals, but rather about the confluence of power, influence, and long-standing family heritage. The Rockefellers also distinguished themselves through public service and philanthropy. As previously noted, Nelson held the high office of Vice President under President Gerald Ford, reinforcing the family's presence in the nation's political sphere. Simultaneously, his brother Lawrence carved out a niche as a venture capitalist and passionate conservationist, contributing to the preservation of natural habitats and environmental sustainability. Continuing the family's trajectory in public service, John D. Rockefeller IV, more commonly called Jay, Nelson's nephew and a fourth-generation Rockefeller, built a significant political career. Born in 1937, Jay served as West Virginia's Secretary of State and later as the state's governor, impressively holding office from 1977 to 1985. In 1984, he was elected to the United States Senate, serving 5 terms until he decided not to seek re-election in 2014. As a senator, Jay championed issues such as healthcare reform and internet privacy, thus maintaining the family's tradition of public service. Additionally, embedded in the core of the Rockefeller family's legacy is their remarkable philanthropy. The Rockefellers became known as patrons of education and the arts, helping to shape America's cultural landscape. They lent their considerable resources to institutions such as the University of Chicago and the Museum of Modern Art. This deep-rooted philanthropy wasn't simply about donating money, it was an essential tool for shaping their public persona, showcasing their commitment to societal advancement. Yet alongside this is their equally noteworthy ability to amass and preserve substantial wealth. This duality reflects the character of John D. Rockefeller himself, who was known to be a ruthless businessman, yet an incredibly generous philanthropist. Their philanthropic ventures were strategic. They served to not only improve public welfare, but also to bolster their societal standing, assisting in their seamless transition from new money to old money. Through these actions, the Rockefellers were not just cementing their place within societal elites, but also highlighting their dedication to the public good. Therefore, simultaneously, the Rockefellers adopted several strategies to safeguard their wealth, ensuring that it would endure across generations. One significant step in this regard was the establishment of the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913. This move was more than an act of charity. It was a calculated effort to shield their wealth from heavy estate taxes, thereby allowing it to grow and benefit society simultaneously. Over time, the Foundation's immense contributions to public health, education, and arts helped to further establish and fortify the Rockefeller name. Trusts also played a critical role in their wealth preservation strategy. John D. Rockefeller Sr. formed his first trust in 1891, transferring a significant portion of his fortune to it. This move offered both tax advantages and protection against potential heirs' mismanagement, thereby ensuring the continuity of the Rockefeller fortune. In addition, the Rockefellers innovatively used holding companies to manage their diverse business interests. These corporate structures provided a protective shield for their wealth, while also promoting growth. This use of corporate entities set a precedent for future wealthy families, showing how wealth could be protected and multiplied simultaneously. As such, the Rockefellers are a perfect example of how one family managed to become synonymous with philanthropy while maintaining an iron grip on their wealth, demonstrating a duality that has become part of their enduring legacy. There are only a few families in the history of New York that can claim multiple members of their dynasty had a direct impact on the city that never sleeps. Sure, we've all learned about and marveled at monikers like Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, Carnegie, and Astor. However, what if I was to tell you that there's one family you might never have heard of, who've not only helped turn that small Dutch trading post on the tip of Manhattan into the Big Apple, but they also, since before America was even a country, had a direct hand in building up the United States military dominance, commercial development from coast to coast, and even arguably created the modern American aviation industry, all while snapping up the most impressive collection of artworks and opulent museums New York has ever seen. Indeed, in the pantheon of families in America, we could term old money, there's only one that has accomplished all of that and more: the Whitneys. In today's video at Old Money Luxury, we'll tell you the good, the bad, and the luxury of this illustrious dynasty as we unveil the old money family who own New York's art scene. The storied lineage of the Whitney family, a name that would become synonymous with ambition, innovation, and enterprise throughout the entire history of the United States, begins with John Whitney, born in Westminster, London, in 1592. His immigration to America during the Puritan Great Migration of the mid-17th century likely involved seeking opportunities and religious freedom, aligning with the aspirations of many Puritans of his time. You see, life in 17th century America was demanding for the Puritans, defined by a harsh New England climate and an often unforgiving landscape. However, the Puritan ethos, underpinned by values like community, hard work, and education, gave rise to a unique, innovative spirit. They were not only responsible for founding some of the first schools and colleges in America, including Harvard University, but also for instilling in their descendants a tireless pursuit of success. This innovative and entrepreneurial spirit helped to lay the groundwork for several major old money dynasties of Puritan lineage, such as the Astors, the Cabots, the Lowells, and the Whitneys. These families, carrying forward the legacy of their Puritan forebears, not only made significant contributions to American industry, finance, and trade, but also were patrons of arts and culture. The Whitneys, for example, invested heavily in various cultural endeavors. Their appreciation of education and moral enrichment, stemming from their Puritan roots, eventually led to substantial investment in art. Now, the Whitney family mansion, the Elms built in Watertown in 1710, would eventually stand as a lasting symbol of the family's prominence and success. Indeed, the early Whitney family's strong work ethic helped set the stage for business triumphs during an era when America was still finding its bearings. For example, Asa Whitney, a descendant of the prominent family, was an early visionary in recognizing the monumental potential of railroads in America. His fervent advocacy, though not resulting in direct construction, ignited public interest and led to the realization of the Union Pacific's opening in 1869. The importance of railroads to the development of modern America cannot be overstated. They became the lifeblood of the economy, accelerating industrial growth, connecting distant regions, and creating opportunities for millions. In particular, the Whitney family's role in this transformation exemplifies their lasting impact on the nation. Asa's vision for railroads, combined with the family's broader entrepreneurial spirit, contributed significantly to shaping the interconnected, prosperous America we know today, reflecting the family's legacy of innovation and progress. Additionally, Eli Whitney Jr., born in 1765, was a revolutionary figure who transformed the antebellum South with his invention of the cotton gin. Though he believed his invention would reduce the need for enslaved labor, it paradoxically strengthened the economic foundation of slavery by increasing the efficiency of cotton production. After losing profits to patent infringement, Whitney's innovative spirit led him to manufacture muskets for the U.S. Army, a pursuit he continued until his death in 1825, leaving an indelible mark on American industry. Furthermore, in 1885, the Whitney family's influence on America's development continued with William Collins Whitney's appointment as U.S. Secretary of the Navy. His belief in domestically produced warships being superior or equal to foreign-made ones guided a transformative era in naval modernization. Under his leadership, naval appropriations more than doubled, enabling the construction of advanced steel steamships and modern guns. His strategic vision, commitment to innovation, and belief in American manufacturing capability played a pivotal role in the nation's emergence as a global maritime power. Ships like the battleship Maine, constructed during his tenure, became symbols of American naval might, and his efforts set the stage for the United States' prominent role during the Spanish-American War and beyond. Thus, the Whitneys, in their essence, encapsulate the very spirit of American old money. With roots reaching back to the country's Puritan beginnings, they played an essential role in shaping America's financial and military might. Their influence extends even to the concept of the U.S. fulfilling its manifest destiny from coast to coast. But the close of the 19th century was merely a chapter in their storied legacy. The Whitney influence was poised for further expansion, setting the stage for an alliance with one of the Gilded Age's most distinguished families. The next masterstroke in their saga was yet to be played, a fitting continuation of a family that had already scripted some of the most legendary pages in the young nation's history. As the 20th century dawned, the union of two powerful American families signaled a new era of influence and innovation. On August 25, 1896, Gertrude Vanderbilt of the wealthy Vanderbilt clan married Harry Payne Whitney from the aforementioned Whitneys. Their offspring, Cornelius Vanderbilt Whitney, would inherit a fortune from both family lines and forge a path as a successful businessman in his own right. Cornelius Vanderbilt Whitney's influence would reach soaring heights in the field of commercial aviation. As one of the founders of Pan American Airways, established in 1927, he played a vital role in transforming the industry. Pan Am, with its pioneering spirit, became instrumental in introducing jet aircraft for commercial use, setting new standards for the entire aviation world. Whitney's backing, alongside other investors like William Avery Rockefeller III of the legendary Rockefeller dynasty, supported one trip in creating the Aviation Corporation of America, which later evolved into Pan American World Airways. Before World War II, Pan Am stood alone as America's international airline and continued to define commercial flight by employing innovative technologies and aircraft types like the Boeing 707 and Boeing 747. These advances allowed Pan Am to offer unprecedented capacity and range, flying more passengers with fewer stops than their competitors. Pan Am's relentless pursuit of modernization and its significant contributions to commercial aviation had a lasting impact socially, politically, and economically. Its efforts helped shrink the world, changing global culture and leaving a legacy that continues to influence the industry. Though the airline faced financial hurdles and ceased operations in 1991, its pioneering spirit and groundbreaking contributions remain a vital chapter in aviation history. So, the Whitneys, having already achieved so much, took their influence to new heights, literally. They helped usher not just America but the entire world into the jet age, propelling humanity into the sky. Yet, even as Cornelius was reshaping the stratosphere, his family was about to stamp an even larger historic imprint back down on Earth. Now, the story of how the Whitney family permeated the artistic fabric of the 20th century finds its muse in Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, a prominent sculptor, patron, and collector. Her passion and influence shaped not only her own legacy, but an entire era of American art. Gertrude's artistic journey began in earnest in 1907 and continued until her death in 1942. In those pivotal years, she established herself as a leading patron of American art, fostering talents that might otherwise have gone unrecognized. In 1914, her vision led her to create the Whitney Studio in Greenwich Village, a haven for contemporary artists whose groundbreaking work was often overlooked by traditional academies. This institution became an incubator for creativity, giving voice to the once voiceless. Her personal collection, growing to over 500 pieces by 1929, was a testament to her dedication. When her generous offer to donate these pieces to the Metropolitan Museum of Art was rebuffed, she took matters into her own hands, founding the Whitney Museum of American Art in 1930. This institution, opened in 1931, has since become a beacon of modern and contemporary American art. From Edward Hopper's iconic works Early Sunday Morning and Nighthawks to Jasper Johns's Three Flags and Louise Bourgeois' Quarantania, the Whitney Museum stands as a repository of diverse styles and subjects that reflect the richness of America's artistic landscape. And Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney's connection to the art world extended beyond mere collecting. Her support for emerging artists, particularly those like Robert Henry of the Ashcan School, fostered an environment where creativity thrived. Now, when the phrase "old money" is mentioned in the context of New York, the Rockefeller name inevitably comes to the fore. However, it is equally important to acknowledge the Whitney family, who have been central to the philanthropic and cultural fabric of New York City. While both the Rockefellers and the Whitneys have a storied history of philanthropic endeavors, their focuses differ. The Rockefellers have long directed their philanthropy towards a broad spectrum of areas, including education, healthcare, and the arts. Their influence permeates various institutions, reflecting a commitment to social welfare and cultural enrichment. The Whitney family, on the other hand, has been especially passionate about supporting the arts. The Whitney Museum of American Art has been pivotal in championing American art and artists at a time when European art often overshadowed local talents. Yet the Whitney family's support has not stopped at the museum. Their ongoing endeavors include initiatives like the Whitney Family Foundation, focused on organ donor registration services and medical research. So, while the Rockefellers may be more widely recognized, the Whitney family's cultural contributions to New York are undeniable and deserve recognition. However, their influence has not been without controversy. Over the years, the Whitneys have faced criticisms regarding their sway over cultural institutions and the arts. The Whitney Museum itself has been at the center of various disputes, such as the backlash for displaying a portrait of Emmett Till by a white artist during a Whitney biennial. This, along with instances of acquiring artworks at discounted prices without artists' consent, has led to public consternation. Moreover, the Whitney family's substantial influence in the art world has been critiqued for potentially overshadowing the impact of other individuals and groups. Specific controversies, like threats from family members to disinherit the museum over a piece accused of trivializing the Holocaust, have fueled public debates, further fanned by political figures like New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. Yet despite these controversies and the complexities of navigating their significant cultural footprint, the Whitney family's commitment to the arts persists in the 21st century. Their enduring impact on art institutions and cultural initiatives continues to shape the artistic landscape of New York. The duality of their legacy, marked by both significant contributions and public scrutiny, presents a nuanced view of a family deeply entwined with the city's cultural evolution, embodying both the triumphs and challenges of philanthropy in the arts. These days, under the glittering lights of New York's vibrant cultural landscape, descendants of Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney continue to weave their influence into the 21st century. Notable members such as Flora Miller Biddle and Fiona Donovan have maintained the family's artistic legacy, significantly contributing to the Whitney Museum of American Art's growth and development. Flora Miller Biddle, Gertrude's granddaughter, served as the museum's president, steering its evolution and reinforcing its position as a cultural beacon. Fiona Donovan, another descendant, has also played a vital role, echoing the family's enduring commitment to the arts. Additionally, Wheelock Locke Whitney III, an influential art collector and dealer, has furthered the family's artistic patronage through his contributions of notable 18th and 19th century paintings to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Now, Eli Whitney Debevoise II, another powerful member of the Whitneys, has extended the family's influence into international finance and law, serving as the U.S. executive director of the controversial World Bank Group and a partner at law firm Arnold & Porter LLP. Gertrude's descendant Phyllis Whitney's literary prowess brought a different dimension to the family's prominence. An award-winning mystery writer, her more than 70 novels made her an enduring figure in American literature. And Benson Whitney's diplomatic service as the United States ambassador to Norway and his venture capital endeavors further showcase the family's extensive power plays, intricately linked with American governance and innovation. This tapestry of influence, woven through art, literature, governance, and philanthropy, paints a picture of a family deeply intertwined with the cultural, social, and political fabric of New York and beyond. Literally since the days of the Puritans, before the country was founded, the Whitneys have found a way to outwit, outdo, and indeed outlast many other so-called old money families throughout every epoch of American history. In the ever-evolving panorama of America's powerful dynasties, few families have sculpted the societal, political, and economic landscapes with such unrelenting vigor and artistry as the Roosevelts. Originating from 17th century Dutch immigrant roots in what would become New York City, the name Roosevelt quickly rose to encapsulate a kind of American royalty, whether brandishing their clout at the presidential podium or orchestrating financial miracles from ornate boardrooms. Indeed, the history of the Roosevelt family isn't merely a genealogical record, it's an exhilarating chronicle of American power and influence, spanning from the present day back to before the United States was even a country. Join us in today's episode of Old Money Luxury as we bring you through the entire journey, and describe how the Roosevelts went from old money to presidents. Our story begins in the year 1650, more than 100 years before the founding of the United States, when America's first Roosevelt ancestor, the Dutch-born Claus Martensen van Roosevelt, landed in the teeming harbors of New Amsterdam, a city that would grow into the metropolis we now know as New York City. In 1652, lured by the siren call of untapped prospects, Claus procured a considerable swathe of prime land in a fertile expanse in what is presently known as Midtown Manhattan from one Lambert van Valkenburg. Interestingly, this clairvoyant acquisition encompassed terrain that was destined to host monumental landmarks such as the Empire State Building, the legendary Madison Avenue of Mad Men fame, and the J.P. Morgan Library. Specifically, the area stretched from present-day Lexington Avenue and Fifth Avenue to roughly 29th Street, over to 35th Street. In terms of contemporary measurements, this area comprised an excess of 50 acres of prime real estate, with Claus's son, Nicholas, leveraging the land ownership to ascend to the prominent position of the city's first alderman, thus pioneering the family name's inextricable connection with political power and financial influence. Now, Nicholas's children, Johannes and Jacobus, perpetuated their father's esteemed legacy, establishing two distinguished Roosevelt lineages, those hailing from the environs of Oyster Bay and Hyde Park. To put this into perspective, both Oyster Bay and Hyde Park were settings that helped inspire the neighborhoods dramatized in F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby and its subsequent films. So even back then, it would seem the Roosevelts knew a thing or two about where old money likes to reside. Now, Johannes Roosevelt was an entrepreneur endowed with extraordinary foresight, quickly becoming a family trait, and the successive generations born of Johannes wove themselves into New York's most elite circles through strategic matrimonial alliances with other prosperous families and shrewd real estate acquisitions in key locations around the city, as previously mentioned. Their marital liaisons served not merely as romantic unions, but as tactical partnerships that cemented their preeminence among New York's high society, the Roosevelt name thus growing to be reverently uttered alongside the city's most formidable luminaries. Next, Cornelius Roosevelt, the great-grandson of Johannes, significantly bolstered the family's wealth and empire-like ambitions. Inheriting a substantial fortune from his father, James Jacobus Roosevelt, in 1840, he quickly further enmeshed the name Roosevelt with New York City's financial elite. Initially involved in hardware imports, Cornelius wisely shifted his focus to the lucrative plate glass industry, significantly boosting his wealth. Moreover, Cornelius didn't just stop at industry. He ventured into finance as the founding director of the Chemical Bank of New York, a precursor to today's J.P. Morgan Chase & Company. In terms of raw numbers, he stood shoulder to shoulder with leading millionaires of his era, such as William B. Astor and Peter Lorillard. And by 1868, his fortune had likely soared to an estimated $25 million, equivalent to roughly $600 million today. Thus, while the name Roosevelt is now predominantly linked with political power, we can't overlook its deep entanglement with New York City's financial aristocracy. Indeed, this monumental family was a pillar in the city's transition from a modest Dutch trading post to an unparalleled epicenter of wealth and power, on both a national and global scale. Yet, as we know, wealth is but one dimension of success, and working your way into the White House during America's Gilded Age presents an entirely separate set of challenges and achievements. Little did Cornelius know that his grandson, Theodore, a child that he undoubtedly knew since their lifetimes overlapped significantly, would stretch well past the successes of even his multimillionaire grandfather in just a few short decades. Across the East River from Manhattan, at the same time, the real estate Roosevelts were building their empire. Family member Isaac Roosevelt, the great-great-grandfather of FDR, was quickly becoming one of the first large-scale sugar refiners in New York City, before leveraging that influence to serve in the New York State Assembly and the State Constitutional Convention. Therefore, Isaac holds the notable distinction as having achieved the most political success of any Roosevelt before his cousin, the future President Teddy. However, it would be uncouth to not mention here that Isaac's sugar business was heavily reliant on slave labor, as New York City's sugar was cultivated almost entirely by enslaved persons in the Caribbean. Thus, without mincing words, an essential root of the substantial wealth, prominence and influence that the Hyde Park Roosevelts came to amass, Franklin and Eleanor's line of the family derived directly from America's engagement in the transatlantic slave trade. With Isaac's passing, the torch of Roosevelt ambition was bequeathed to ensuing generations. James, Isaac's son, donned the familial mantle with vim and vigor as he additionally wove through the complex corridors of New York City's political stage, the banking sector, and the nuanced world of sugar refinement. More importantly, an unforgettable headquarters of the family's prominence would be purchased by James and his lineal successors in 1819, when they banded together to create a sanctuary for the Roosevelts in Hyde Park, New York. A few decades later, in the throbbing core of New York City, another world-changing Roosevelt was brought forth into the world in the morning hours of the 27th of October, 1858. Theodore Roosevelt, the second child in a brood of four, seemed preordained for unparalleled achievements. His father, Theodore Sr., had descended from a cadre of affluent entrepreneurs in the Roosevelt family line, while concurrently his mother, the winsome Martha "Mittie" Roosevelt, drew her heritage from the agrarian expanses of a Georgian plantation. Nurtured within the warmth of a close-knit domestic sphere, young Theodore, affectionately termed Teedy, found his childhood beset by a looming malaise, recurrent asthma that adhered to him with unyielding obstinacy. Fueled by youthful determination, he resolved to fortify his physique. In this aspiration, he discovered a lifelong commitment to building the body's vitality, adopting gymnastic routines and weightlifting regimens, exuberantly subscribing to the philosophy of leading a strenuous life. Set against a backdrop of private tutors and globe-trotting adventures, including a trip to the then German Empire, Theodore's quenchless intellectual appetite only intensified. This scholarly yearning propelled him to Harvard University's hallowed halls in 1876, where his academic explorations encompassed German linguistics, natural history, biology, forensic studies, and rhetorical composition. Yet his ebullience transcended scholarly limits as he enthusiastically delved into boxing and wrestling, thereby wholeheartedly welcoming the thrill of physical enterprise. Then, in an extraordinary twist of fate, love graced Theodore's already monumental life path. It was through a fortuitous introduction by a mutual acquaintance at Harvard that he encountered Alice Hathaway Lee, the heiress of a prosperous New England banking dynasty. Their affections for each other matured with swift intensity, culminating in vows exchanged amidst the russet hues of October in the year 1880. Although Theodore initially embarked on legal studies at Columbia Law School, the clarion call of public service resounded too powerfully to ignore, leading him to forsake his legal ambitions within just a year. At that moment, we have to wonder if even Teddy himself was ready for what would happen next, as his indomitable zest for life and political verve would not only lead him to the top of power in the United States, but usher in a family dominance over America's trajectory that had never been seen before or since. Now, in the year 1884, Theodore Roosevelt faced a gut-wrenching calamity that shattered his world in a mere 48 hours. As Alice delivered their firstborn daughter, Alice Lee, Theodore was forced to confront the unspeakable sorrow of losing both his mother to typhoid and his cherished Alice to renal complications, all within the confines of their home. Heart-rending grief led him to immerse himself in his political obligations for the ensuing 4 months. However, perhaps to process the heartache, the irrefutable allure of untamed landscapes called him away from the East Coast. Theodore journeyed into the rough-hewn Dakota Badlands, finding a semblance of solace as a cattle rancher and frontier wayfarer. Amidst the sprawling plains, he found a retreat in grizzly bear hunting and the pastoral care of his livestock. The unforgiving winter of 1887 to 1888 decimated most of his cattle, steering his resolve to return to the East Coast, where he nurtured a love rekindled for his childhood infatuation, Edith Kermit Carow. In a move worthy of romantic novels, the couple pledged their eternal devotion in a remote English ceremony in 1886. United, they constructed their domestic sanctuary in the captivating environs of Sagamore Hill in one of the aforementioned hometowns, Oyster Bay, New York. Their family expanded in subsequent years, with another Theodore, Kermit, Ethel, Archibald, and Quentin joining Alice. And upon his return to New York, Teddy fervently resumed his written endeavors, which initially had gained recognition with his esteemed volume, The Naval War of 1812, published in 1882. During this prolific stretch, he authored several notable works, including The Life of Thomas Hart Benton in 1887, The Life of Gouverneur Morris in 1888, and his magnum opus, The Winning of the West, a 4-volume epic with a release schedule that spanned more than a half-decade. Furthermore, political aspirations rekindled within Theodore Roosevelt as he sought the position of New York City's mayor in 1886, albeit without attaining victory. However, his ensuing endorsement of Republican presidential candidate Benjamin Harrison in 1888 propelled him to the national stage. Harrison's triumph facilitated Theodore's appointment to the Civil Service Commission, a responsibility he honored with steadfast dedication, unwavering in his commitment, even when faced with considerable political persuasions to bend ethical norms. Adhering to his principled views on civil service laws, Roosevelt didn't waver even after securing a second appointment from Democratic President Grover Cleveland in 1893, despite the disapproval of party luminaries. Transitioning to the role of president of the New York City Police Board in 1895, he pursued reforms with an indomitable will. His endeavors included banning Sunday alcohol sales and purging corruption from the police board itself. The year 1897 marked another career milestone when President-elect William McKinley appointed Teddy Assistant Secretary of the Navy, aligning with Roosevelt's fervent belief in naval power as a cornerstone of national defense, and the explosion of the U.S. battleship Maine in Havana Harbor in 1898 propelled him into immediate action. As acting Secretary of the Navy, he swiftly mobilized the Navy and directed Commodore George Dewey to brace for combat with Spain, a critical prelude to the imminent invasion of the Philippines. As the Spanish-American War broke out, Roosevelt forsook his administrative position to lead the 1st U.S. Volunteer Cavalry, popularly known as the Rough Riders. This eclectic unit, consisting of Ivy League graduates, cowboys, sheriffs, police officers, and Native Americans, stormed San Juan Hill under Roosevelt's leadership, showcasing unmatched bravery even amidst devastating casualties. Their triumphant return to the United States earned them near universal praise and solidified Roosevelt's military legacy. Upon his being crowned a celebrated war hero, Roosevelt found himself courted by New York's Republican Party to vie for the gubernatorial seat. Running against Democrat Judge Augustus Van Wyck in a hotly contested race, Roosevelt clinched a slim victory, bolstered by the influential backing of Thomas C. Platt, the state's Republican Party stalwart. However, Roosevelt's unwavering commitment to autonomous policy-making and patronage quickly led to a rift with Platt. Specifically, as Roosevelt delved into progressive policy measures, such as taxing public utilities, tensions with Platt escalated. Recognizing Roosevelt's capacity to destabilize the Republican state apparatus, Platt cleverly maneuvered to elevate him to the vice presidency in 1900, thus blocking his path to re-election as governor. Accepting the position, Roosevelt recalibrated his ambitions toward the presidency in 1904, fully cognizant that party leaders had choreographed the convention to pave his way. Subsequently, Theodore Roosevelt Jr. emerged as the uncontested choice for vice president in the Republican nomination, a clear sign of the party's confidence in him. With vigor, he took to the campaign trail to support William McKinley, his party's candidate for president. Standing against McKinley were Democratic challengers William Jennings Bryan and Adlai E. Stevenson. And Roosevelt's campaign was nothing short of a spectacle, reaching over 3 million people firsthand. A specially chartered train carried him across more than 20,000 miles as he delivered impassioned addresses in more than 500 locales, spread across 24 states. As newspaper columnist Mr. Dooley humorously noted, "'Tis Tiddy alone that's running," adding, "He ain't a-running, he's galloping." And this energy paid off. With a lead of over 800,000 votes, the McKinley-Roosevelt ticket triumphed, marking one of the largest victories for the Republicans in years. Of the 70.2 million votes cast, McKinley garnered 292 electoral college votes, dwarfing Bryan's 155, and the win was even more commanding than McKinley's initial victory in 1896. However, tragedy soon struck in September 1901, when President McKinley was assassinated by a wild gunman, somewhat unexpectedly thrusting Theodore Roosevelt into position as the 26th President of the United States, and the youngest to ever hold the office. While Theodore Roosevelt was grappling with his first full term as president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Teddy's cousin, and Eleanor Roosevelt, Teddy's niece, married in front of a glamorous gathering of society's elite on a brisk spring day in 1905. Indeed, this wedding represented more than just marital bliss. It signified the merger of two American dynasties. Franklin's father, James Roosevelt, was already a paragon of old money affluence, not just a successful entrepreneur, but also a generous philanthropist within New York society. Yet Franklin's mother, Sarah Delano Roosevelt, was no less remarkable. She hailed from the Delano family, a lineage known for their maritime and trading empires, which had garnered both significant wealth and social influence over the years. Eleanor Roosevelt's parentage also boasted remarkable elite credentials, adding another layer of complexity to the Roosevelt couple's shared heritage. Her father, Elliott Roosevelt, was a sibling to Theodore Roosevelt. However, his life was tragically marred by struggles with addiction, a plight that colored Eleanor's early years, but also fortified her resilience and sense of empathy. And her mother, Anna Hall Roosevelt, descended from the distinguished Livingston and Ludlow families, both storied names that stretched back to the founding days of the American colonies. Indeed, the Livingstons were influential politicians and landowners whose members included signatories of the Declaration of Independence, while the Ludlows were known for their legal contributions, including their role in framing early American jurisprudence. Therefore, both Franklin and Eleanor were products of families deeply rooted in American history and tradition, yet also profoundly influenced by the progressive ideologies that had evolved within the Roosevelt lineage. You see, the couple's cousin/uncle, Theodore Roosevelt, had played a pivotal role during the progressive era. Franklin would later inherit this dedication to social transformation, while Eleanor would become a legendary champion for gender equality and social fairness. Thus, their matrimony evolved into an ideal collaboration, each complementing the other's traits and talents. Franklin, with his captivating charisma and outgoing nature, provided the vision. Eleanor, intelligent and more reserved, offered practical insight, and together they were an unstoppable force. Years later, when Franklin assumed the presidency in 1933, the United States was plunged into the depths of the Great Depression. Unemployment was rampant, and the economy was on the verge of collapse. Wasting no time, Franklin began to roll out a sequence of initiatives collectively known as the New Deal, aimed at offering relief to the jobless, energizing the economy, and restructuring the financial landscape. The New Deal was a monumental undertaking. Additionally, in the context of New Deal achievements, the Social Security Administration stood out as another seminal program. Serving as a financial safety net, the SSA extended support to the elderly, the differently abled, and those without employment. Though the New Deal faced its share of detractors, those who criticized its cost or argued that it expanded governmental power too much, Franklin D. Roosevelt remained resolute. Furthermore, Franklin D. Roosevelt's leadership during World War II marked another pivotal chapter in his tenure. As Commander-in-Chief, he navigated the United States through one of the darkest periods in human history. The strategic alliance he formed with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin, known as the Big Three, played a decisive role in the defeat of the Third Reich. Under his guidance, the US military was mobilized on an unprecedented scale, contributing to victories in both the European and Pacific theaters. His direction of initiatives such as the Manhattan Project also pushed the boundaries of what was scientifically possible, although these actions would generate complex ethical debates for years to come. Following Franklin D. Roosevelt's death in 1945, Eleanor persisted as an influential public persona. Arguably, her magnum opus was her role in crafting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a seminal document outlining the essential liberties inherent to all human beings. Not only has the Declaration been translated into more than 500 languages, but it also stands as the world's most universally translated document. Her imprint was also felt in the struggle for racial equality in America, as Eleanor was vocal in opposing racial segregation and various forms of discrimination. In fact, she walked side by side with iconic civil rights figures like Martin Luther King Jr., pushing the US towards a more egalitarian future. Eleanor Roosevelt passed away in November 1962 at the age of 78, leaving millions around the globe in a state of sorrow. Her influence on American civic life and the advancement of civil liberties was immeasurable, However, with her passing, the name Roosevelt would not disappear as a fixture of American life. Indeed, we could argue that the next generation of Roosevelts would only further bolster and expand a legacy that was older than the country itself. Born in August 1914, just a few months before the end of hostilities in World War I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt Jr. inherited a name with perhaps no more prestige and pressure than any other moniker in American history. At the time of his birth, his father FDR was Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and after a notable military career, Franklin Jr. held a congressional seat representing New York from 1949 to 1955. There, he poured unflagging energy into representing his constituents and championing issues dear to him, leading to President John F. Kennedy taking note of his prowess and designated him Under Secretary of Commerce in 1963. In this capacity, he contributed to the economic prosperity of the nation, extending the Roosevelt lineage of high-level government involvement and financial power. Further solidifying his family's long commitment to progressive ideals, Roosevelt Jr. served as the inaugural chairman of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission from 1965 to 1966, an agency that became a linchpin in the struggle for civil liberties and workplace fairness. And notably, FDR Jr. himself continued the old money tradition of strategic intermarriage like his father and mother, with Jr. marrying legendary DuPont heiress and socialite Ethel DuPont in 1937. These days, the Roosevelt family is still inextricably connected to both public service and membership in the financial elite, as they have been for literally hundreds of years at this point. For example, Theodore Roosevelt IV has carved out a name for himself as an investment banker and ardent environmentalist. Passionate about conservation and sustainable practices, he's founded multiple eco-focused organizations and championed wildlife and land preservation on a global scale. Tweed Roosevelt, also a great-grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt, heads the Theodore Roosevelt Association as its president and CEO. This non-profit entity is dedicated to safeguarding the enduring impact of President Theodore Roosevelt, and Tweed is a fervent advocate for both ecological conservation and public duty, much like his great-grandfather. As far as descendants of FDR, Mark Roosevelt made his mark in the educational realm, serving as the executive director of St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, from 2014 to 2018, and Kermit Roosevelt III has gained recognition as a constitutional law professor at the University of Pennsylvania. All in all, the Roosevelt family is, much like many American dynasties, a collage of contradictions. On one hand, they are a bunch of ruthless, old-money business tacticians, snapping up real estate, financial clout, and political power with the hunger of wolves. On the other, they are a living embodiment of noblesse oblige, a family that never let their extreme wealth and influence get in the way of their responsibility to do good for not only their fellow citizens, but the entire world at large. I want you to imagine that you've recently been gifted with seemingly unlimited control over the media narrative of America's richest and most influential city. Furthermore, with a simple unlocking of your phone and a few quick texts, you could contact your closest family members, comfortable with the knowledge that by the next morning you could make or break the livelihood of almost any politician, business tycoon, or even country. Although this Machiavellian level of instant power might seem enticing to some families, the ugly truth is that not only having but also keeping such world-changing influence for a lifetime, let alone for a century, is a feat that most of us simply wouldn't have the ingredients, let's call it that, to pull it off. In today's video at Old Money Luxury, we'll be discussing one particular family dynasty that, to put it bluntly, doesn't have that problem of us mere mortals, and do in fact possess the ingredients of power. Indeed, the Sulzbergers, along with their founding in-laws, the Oaks family, have owned the New York Times for an eye-watering 120-plus years, guiding America's paper of record, as they call it, through both world wars, the Great Depression and Great Recession, presidential assassinations and resignations, multiple pandemics, and into the 21st century globalized world, all while managing to keep it in the family and maintain their status as the top dogs of New York and arguably American media. However, in order to recount their meteoric rise to stratospheric power properly, we must first start at the beginning, with a saga that begins, like so many classic American rags-to-riches tales, with a little-known immigrant reaching the shores of the land of opportunity, and snatching influence from the jaws of mediocrity. Our journey to the heights of media dominance begins in the seminal year of 1896, when Adolph Ochs, a 38-year-old media magnate hailing from Chattanooga, Tennessee, seized possession of the New York Times, a floundering newspaper in dire need of resurgence. At the time, the once iconic newspaper's circulation had plummeted to around 9,000 copies, a paltry fraction of what its competitors were boasting, and the Times management was fraught with inefficiencies, leading to financial losses that put the paper on the brink of bankruptcy. Furthermore, the rise of yellow journalism, characterized by sensationalism and sometimes irresponsible reporting by competitors like William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal and Joseph Pulitzer's New York World, was drawing readers away. These factors contributed to the paper's loss of desirability and financial solvency, creating a ripe opportunity for someone like Adolph Ochs to step in and attempt a turnaround. Born in Germany into a distinguished Jewish lineage, young Ochs immigrated to American soil and soon took the world of journalism by storm, rapidly ascending through its echelons. For example, in 1884, he claimed ownership of the Chattanooga Times and fastidiously turned it into a paragon of journalistic success in the southern states. Subsequently envisioning an even grander stage for his talents, Ochs's astute media eye saw the New York Times as the quintessential American newspaper of record, and thus aspired for it to gain unparalleled reverence and global readership in the coming 20th century. But Ochs' ability to climb the ladders of power extended far beyond simply turning newspapers into media giants. His shrewd marriage decisions would also have a part to play in the family's monumental rise to influence. In 1900, Adolph Ochs wedded the captivating Effie Wise. Far from an ordinary woman, Effie was the daughter of Rabbi Isaac Meyer Wise, an American Jewish luminary. Joining hearts and uniting empires, Effie ushered Ochs into the orbit of her affluent uncles, Cyrus and Ferdinand Sulzberger, formidable pillars in the spheres of cotton trade and jurisprudence, respectively. Given their previous experience in commerce, Cyrus and Ferdinand Sulzberger were no strangers to the machinations of business and power. Recognizing the potential to extend their influence and prestige, the Sulzbergers invested both financial resources and social capital into Adolph's vision for the New York Times, becoming stakeholders in its success. Now, to resurrect the Times name and financial stability, the Ochs-Sulzberger gents implemented a multi-pronged approach. Ochs focused on raising the journalistic standards, eschewing the sensationalism that characterized much of the era's press, while Cyrus and Ferdinand invested in new printing technologies to improve efficiency and lower costs. Additionally, the Sulzberger brothers leveraged their social and business networks to secure advantageous advertising contracts and facilitated exclusive interviews and scoops, all while simultaneously clearing its debt and positioning it as a serious publication committed to journalistic integrity. Riding this string of business victories, by 1904, the New York Times had moved its operations to an imposing edifice in Longacre Square, standing as the tallest structure in the metropolis and signaling the paper's soaring ambitions. Such an auspicious relocation led to the square's eventual rechristening as Times Square, a monumental site that became synonymous with the vibrant pulse of New York City. Even better for the family of burgeoning media tycoons, in 1913, the New York Times was lavished with its first Pulitzer Prize for public service, specifically for its unparalleled coverage of the tragic sinking of the Titanic, further increasing the paper's reputation as a guardian of journalistic excellence. Entering the Roaring Twenties, the familial networks of Ochs and the Sulzbergers intertwined even more deeply in the intricacies of the New York Times, with Arthur Hayes Sulzberger, Adolph's industrious son-in-law, affiliating himself with the paper in 1918, with Arthur's swift ascent within the company culminating in his becoming the publisher in 1935, and additional members from both prestigious families enrolling in the publication's operations during this period. Thus, by the decade's end, the New York Times was securely helmed by the united visions of the Ochs and Sulzberger clans, undertaking diverse roles from reporting and editing to publishing. However, this up-and-coming power family would soon face challenges and temptations that not even their vast wealth and influence could easily conquer. Could the integrity of the Sulzbergers' cash cow newspaper withstand the seismic shifts of a society on the brink of World War II, political upheaval, and technological revolution? In the transformative year of 1935, Arthur Hayes Sulzberger, Adolf Ochs's aforementioned son-in-law, assumed the role of publisher for the New York Times, inheriting the monumental legacy and vision for journalistic supremacy. Sulzberger was an unwavering sentinel for press freedom and navigated the paper through an epoch marked by monumental global happenings, spanning from the tumultuous tides of World War II, the ideological entanglements of the Cold War, to the divisive quagmire of the Vietnam War. However, not content with mere domestic triumph, Sulzberger had further propelled the paper into the international arena, inaugurating overseas bureaus in the hopes of furnishing a balanced, thorough coverage of global events. At the cornerstone of the Sulzberger dynasty was Iphigenie Ochs Sulzberger, Arthur's indomitable wife and the child of Adolf Ochs. Her role in the family enterprise was far from ornamental. She was an integral member of the board of directors for the New York Times Company for an extensive period. Additionally, her influence permeated the newspaper's managerial echelons. A fervent advocate for women's empowerment, Iphigenie ensured the elevation of women to commanding roles within the newspaper's infrastructure, and her philanthropic interests also extended into the realms of arts and education, reinforcing the family's wider societal impact. Therefore, as we can see, the Ochs-Sulzberger dynasty had, in the span of just 2 generations, followed the old money family playbook of strategic intermarriage, placing family members in key positions of influence and extending their financial clout from the local to the global arena. Now, in 1967, the formation of the New York Times Company heralded an era of diversification and expansive growth. Though the venture went public, the reins of power were still firmly clutched by the Sulzberger lineage. The corporation branched into a multifaceted media conglomerate, adding radio and television stations, along with magazines, to its burgeoning empire. Furthermore, in the year of 1971, under the vigilant guardianship of the Sulzberger family, the New York Times took an audacious leap in journalistic valor by publishing the Pentagon Papers, classified government documents laying bare the obscured realities of the Vietnam War. This publication sent seismic shockwaves through the corridors of power, culminating in a titanic legal clash between the Nixon administration and the newspaper. When the dust settled, it was seen a triumph for the First Amendment, as the Supreme Court sided with the venerable institution of the New York Times. The same pivotal year also saw the newspaper grapple with labor strikes, orchestrated by the Newspaper Guild, representing the journalists and staff. These strikes crippled the paper's operations for months, suspending publication on multiple occasions. This crucible not only disrupted the newspaper's workflow, it additionally served as a moment of reckoning for the Sulzberger family, bringing to light limitations on their hereditary dominion over New York media, and prompting questions about whether or not the family would ruin their then decades-long chain of generational wealth preeminence. The Sulzbergers answered the call for financial innovation in 1976 by taking the New York Times Company public. The sale of shares to external investors yielded an immediate influx of capital, albeit at the cost of diluting the family's controlling stake. This strategic move also instituted a new governance structure, making the company answerable to its shareholders who could now elect the board of directors, thereby adding layers of corporate accountability. And in the 1980s, the Sulzbergers continued their strategic plays to ensure the paper's relevance and financial stability. Capitalizing on the burgeoning 24-hour news cycle, they acquired several smaller regional newspapers and media outlets to diversify their portfolio. With the launch of new sections like Science Times and investment in investigative journalism, the paper further positioned itself as an intellectual authority, not merely a general newspaper of record. Towards the end of the third generation of Ochs-Sulzberger ownership of the New York Times, the family had learned some key lessons on how to maintain both generational wealth and monumental global power. They had learned to take calculated business risks, such as the controversial publishing of the Pentagon Papers, and later their Pulitzer Prize-winning bet on their coverage of the Watergate scandal. They showed a fearless tenacity to face technological advances head-on, such as their early adoption of computerized typesetting in the 1970s, which reduced production costs and increased efficiency. Finally, like many old money families that keep their wealth for generations, they strategically acquired other media assets, such as their eventual purchase of the Boston Globe in 1993, helping to diversify their portfolio and spread financial risk. Now, entering the stage in 1997 was Arthur Sulzberger Jr., the fourth-generation torchbearer of this journalistic dynasty. His tenure commenced in an era of digital disruption and waning print profits. Undeterred, Sulzberger Jr. spearheaded a modernization initiative that would fortify the paper's footing in the 21st century. Investments poured into enhancing digital capabilities and restructuring the print edition, streamlining the number of pages while incorporating vibrant color schemes. These reformative strides yielded fruit. The New York Times metamorphosed yet again into a resilient, financially robust global news entity. However, this seemingly advantageous digital shift for the Sulzbergers' golden goose laid the seeds of potential destruction for the family's empire. For as we all have learned, many of the lessons of the 20th century became useless platitudes and moot points in the face of a rapidly changing 21st century. And what would happen next could crush even the most shrewd of old money families, like the Sulzbergers. On a seemingly tranquil September morning in 2001, New York Times editors sipped their coffees, clueless to how in just a few short hours, the most shocking event in American history since the Kennedy assassination was about to unfold before their very eyes on global television. Under the stewardship of the Sulzbergers, the Times quickly grasped the magnitude of the 9/11 attacks. Commercial planes hijacked by terrorists crashing into the World Trade Center's Twin Towers in New York City and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. This unparalleled act of terror led to the immediate loss of thousands of lives and had a profound impact on national security and foreign policy. Simultaneously, the Times editorial team sprang into action, deploying reporters and photographers to the scenes of destruction and working tirelessly to try to provide comprehensive, reliable coverage during a moment of national crisis. In that pivotal year, a staggering 6 Pulitzer Prizes for journalism were bestowed for New York Times pieces linked to the 9/11 attacks or subsequent anti-terrorism efforts, solidifying the Times' role as a vigilant observer of human conditions. Fast forward to 2003, as the newspaper grapples with its first major ethical quagmire in quite a while. Reporter Jason Blair is caught in a web of deceit. Plagiarism and fabrications mar his contributions. The incident leaves the paper's reputation in jeopardy and prompts serious questions about its editorial rigor. In the aftermath, the newspaper jettisons Blair, issues public apologies, and ushers in reforms to fortify its editorial sanctity. Enhanced standards and augmented editorial staff became the new watchwords. Come 2008, and another crisis looms. This time, the financial scaffolding of Wall Street crumbles. Amid an era where venerable publications collapse like dominoes, the Sulzbergers navigate the New York Times with cautious skill through tumultuous economic currents. Although difficult decisions like workforce reductions are inevitable, their commitment to journalistic quality provides an invaluable service to readers, safeguarding the newspaper's resilience. The year 2011 heralds yet another paradigm shift. Print journalism is on the wane, and a digital vortex beckons. Faced with a crucial decision, the Sulzbergers opt for a digital subscription model. Despite initial skepticism, this audacious move proves transformative, not only enhancing revenue, but becoming a blueprint for the industry, reinforcing the Times' bulwark against digital disruptions. More recently, 2015 marks the advent of A.G. Sulzberger, a youthful inheritor of an august legacy. Young in age but steely in resolve, he perceives digital subscriptions not as an adjunct, but as an imperative. A.G. embarks on a digital renaissance, amplifying online presence, deploying innovative technologies, and tailoring adaptive strategies. Under the leadership of A.G. Sulzberger, the Times witnessed an unparalleled surge in its subscription base, amassing over 8 million loyalists across its print and digital platforms during earth-shattering moments like the COVID-19 pandemic and the 2020 US presidential election. Yet, lurking behind this resurgence in success, the New York Times was quickly racking up a controversial us against them tag. to its reporting practices, as independent journalism and distaste for what many have seen as biased coverage started to shake the very foundations of what the Times and the Sulzbergers had built their name upon: journalistic integrity. Indeed, any conversation about the New York Times and the Sulzberger family that sidesteps the paper's recent series of controversies would be glaringly deficient. Over the last 7 to 8 years, the Times had found itself mired in multiple quagmires that heightened questions about its once legendary journalistic integrity. Take 2015, for example. A comprehensive study accused the Times of unabashed national bias during the Iranian nuclear crisis, contending that it outright minimized the United States' involvement. This was seen as no mere oversight. It was purported to be a failure to present a balanced view. Then jump to 2021, when another scholarly investigation hammered the Times for its persistent bad news bias. More than just a question of tone, the study asserted that the Times' coverage was more negatively tinted than that of any other major publication examined, including scientific journals and international outlets, with the implication of the studying being that the Times had perhaps made a deliberate editorial choice to amplify negativity. But unfortunately for the family, the controversies haven't ended there. In a courtroom drama with Project Veritas, a conservative activist group, the Times found itself on the receiving end of a temporary publishing ban issued by a New York judge. Indeed, this was no trivial matter. The newspaper stood accused of exceeding journalistic boundaries by directly quoting confidential legal documents. Furthermore, throughout the Trump administration, criticisms of bias reached fever pitch. The Times was said to not just be reporting the news. To many, it appeared to be taking sides, adding fuel to an already polarized public discourse. Still ensconced in the eye of this multifaceted storm is the Sulzberger dynasty, the indomitable captains at the newspaper's helm. Commanding a monopoly on the voting shares of the New York Times Company, their imprint on the newspaper's journalistic ethos and commercial strategy is inextricable. While detractors decry this as a hegemonic stranglehold, contending that such familial dominion imperils the newspaper's much-vaunted impartiality, the Sulzbergers advocate that their stewardship serves as the bulwark defending the paper's editorial sanctity. Regardless of which side of the coin you land on, it is clear that the Sulzbergers' leadership of the New York Times for more than a century has been nothing short of remarkable. An unending reign of power plays, shrewd familial transitions, and calculated business moves that could teach us all a little bit more about how it feels to run an old money media empire. In a dimly lit, hushed room swirling with cigar smoke, J.P. Morgan sat like a king on his throne, emanating an aura of unassailable power. Across from him, political candidate William McKinley's face was etched with lines of worry and exhaustion, visibly burdened by the sinking reality that his presidential dreams could soon disintegrate into dust. The year was 1896, and America stood at a political precipice. You see, McKinley's campaign was gasping for financial life, teetering on the edge of insolvency. Sensing the moment's gravity, Morgan unceremoniously produced a staggering check, instantly lifting the weight from McKinley's shoulders and infusing newfound hope into his weary eyes. With that monumental financial lifeline, Morgan didn't just rescue McKinley's campaign, he essentially bought himself a president. Indeed, the sheer audacity of the act is mind-boggling. Imagine a single private citizen with the clout and resources to effectively install a US president, forever cementing his influence into the core of the American establishment. However, in some ways, Morgan wasn't an anomaly, but rather the crowning jewel, in a lineage whose name has become an awe-inspiring symbol of American affluence and dominion. For over 2 centuries, the Morgans have stood as larger-than-life figures, their reach extending from early merchant endeavors to contemporary financial juggernauts like J.P. Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Grenfell. Without a doubt, this old money family hasn't just participated in the creation of modern America, they are some of its primary architects and patrons. In today's video at Old Money Luxury, join us as we retell the entire family saga from their maritime merchant ancestors through J.P. Morgan, the man who essentially invented American finance as we know it, all the way to recent members you can find on social media with parents on reality television. It's quite the story, we'll tell you. With that said, let us begin. From their initial voyage across the storm-tossed Atlantic in 1636, the Morgan family have established themselves as integral elements in the American narrative from the very beginning. Departing the 17th century Welsh countryside, they sought the verdant possibilities of the then Massachusetts Bay Colony, guided by an intoxicating blend of zeal and the quest for an unblemished life. Their ancestor, Miles Morgan, initially settled in Roxbury, Massachusetts, before recognizing the greater opportunities that Springfield presented. At the time, he took on various roles: warrior, farmer, and revered community figure, and attempt to provide pivotal contributions to a colonial society in its infancy. Given such a backdrop as having ancestors here longer than the country has been in existence, sometimes called having American founding stock lineage, it is likely that the Morgans do not see themselves as mere citizens, but as a seminal part of the American founding pedigree. Over decades, this self-perception probably kindles both an exalted pride and a ceaseless ambition, with each successive generation perceiving itself as the custodian of an ancestry that had its roots in the earliest colonial vessels. This sense of duty has thus served as an impassioned catalyst for their various exploits, be it military service, commercial ventures, or their conspicuous role in the social strata. Therefore, as history's pages continued to unfurl, the Morgans continued to evolve from local merchants to dynamic participants in America's fight for independence and economic self-sufficiency. A quintessential portrait of this evolution is Joseph Morgan, Jr., the illustrious great-grandson of Miles Morgan. Holding the rank of captain in the Massachusetts militia, Joseph was therefore an active participant in the drama of the American Revolutionary War, not merely an observer. Post-war, Joseph ventured into the bustling commercial sphere of Connecticut. There, he operated a diverse array of enterprises, a tavern, coffeehouse, and stagecoach line, before co-founding the Aetna Fire Insurance Company in 1819. Indeed, this endeavor has a legacy that reverberates even today. Aetna has evolved into a colossal entity, its roots deeply embedded in the soil of American business history. In 1835, Aetna, under Joseph's direction, experienced a windfall, covering the damages sustained by Wall Street firms during the Great Fire of New York. The decisive moment arrived when Joseph purchased the stakes of hesitant Aetna investors, promptly dispersing insurance payouts to the beleaguered banks. This swift action cemented Aetna's reputation on Wall Street and catapulted its premiums in subsequent years. Therefore, Joseph's commercial triumphs represent a pivotal moment in Morgan history. He was the first family member to be intricately involved with a corporate titan that continues to exert considerable influence today. To put this into a bird's-eye view perspective, the Morgans have thus been business pioneers longer than the United States has even been a country. Now, paving the way for future generations, Joseph would sire a son, Junius Spencer Morgan, destined to become another influential family figure on the global financial stage. Born in Holyoke, Massachusetts in 1813 to Joseph and Sarah Morgan, as was common for entrepreneurial young men of the time, Junius skipped the hallowed halls of university. Instead, at the age of 16, he apprenticed himself to Alfred Wells, a Boston merchant banker. For the next 5 years, Junius gained invaluable experience in the mercantile and banking spheres, absorbing the intricacies of the financial sector in both Boston and New York. You see, Junius was initially drawn to the sphere of business out of a keen sense for opportunity and an innate knack for numbers, more than a little influenced by the American ethos that equated financial success with virtue. Yet for all his prowess, Junius faced numerous challenges. His ventures, notably in the formation of J.S. Morgan and Company, were examined through the lens of ethical inquiry. Critiques often emerged about the firm's investments in enterprises of a morally ambiguous nature, industries built on the backs of underpaid labor, and deals that perpetuated social inequality. Though Junius's financial mastery was beyond reproach, it existed in a delicate interplay with ethical questions that resisted facile resolutions. In 1854, he subsequently embarked on a transformative chapter, uprooting himself to London, a calculated move underpinned by a melange of ambition and practicality. At that time, London was the pulsating heart of global finance and trade, providing Junius a grander stage to magnify his undertakings. In this teeming metropolis, he confronted an intricate tapestry of challenges. For example, America's burgeoning economic protectionism at the time often clashed with Britain's entrenched advocacy for free trade. On the flip side, Britain kept a vigilant eye on the fledgling United States, concerned that its global supremacy could be threatened by American ascendancy. Junius became the dynamic head of the firm in 1859, while Peabody remained the symbolic senior partner. He then inserted himself into London's high society, hosting opulent gatherings at his residences near Hyde Park and in Roehampton. And although Junius's Peabody and Company had considerable involvement in the transatlantic cotton trade, their core business lay in relationships with eastern US banks and railroad companies. This strategic alignment allowed them to remain somewhat insulated from the direct implications of American slavery, a contentious issue that gripped many London-based banks at the time. Therefore, during the tumultuous years of the American Civil War, Junius aligned his interests with the Union. The firm capitalized on this allegiance, trading Union war bonds to astonishing profits. Thus, nestled amidst these geopolitical tectonics and economic dissonances, Junius evolved into an invaluable liaison between American magnates and their European counterparts. He found himself enmeshed in the complex interplay of British-American trade negotiations and international diplomacy. But as Junius and his associates deftly navigated the intricacies of international finance through J.S. Morgan and Company, they could scarcely have foreseen that the legacy they were building would not merely endure, but would be monumentally amplified by the next generation, through his son. Born in 1837, John Pierpont Morgan's path to financial eminence appeared practically preordained. Under the rigorous guidance of his aforementioned father, Junius Spencer Morgan, his upbringing was a fusion of privilege, deliberate strategizing, and a unique set of hardships. You see, Junius was unrelenting in his expectations, pushing his son to excel in every aspect of life. This demanding upbringing had its own difficulties, as John Pierpont was burdened not only by his father's monumental pressures to succeed, but also by a recurrent skin ailment, rosacea, which would accompany J.P. Morgan throughout his life. Furthermore, this facial condition not only scarred him physically, but also influenced how he presented himself to the world. Because of his skin issues, Morgan was selective about how he was photographed, often favoring profiles that lessened the visual impact of his facial challenges. Yet what many perceived as a facial anomaly became, in some ways, an asset in a ruthless business world. His imposing countenance, partly a result of his skin condition, became legendary for intimidating competitors and associates alike. It was as if his visage mirrored the formidable, unyielding nature of his character. Now, to mold his son into a refined, cosmopolitan individual, Junius sent young Morgan to a medley of educational institutions. From the Episcopal Academy in Connecticut to the University of Göttingen in Germany, Morgan's educational journey was as broad as it was elite. This eclectic upbringing served as the cornerstone for a life destined to leave an unforgettable mark on the American business landscape, framing not only his capabilities in finance, but also his nuanced understanding of art, languages, and the complexities of human life. However, J.P. Morgan's early career wasn't without controversy, particularly during the Civil War years. Viewing the war itself not as a calamity, but as a lucrative venture, Morgan dabbled in the morally murky waters of war profiteering. One episode that particularly stands out as emblematic of Morgan's contentious actions is the infamous Hall Carbine affair. In this venture, Morgan financed the acquisition of 5,000 surplus rifles, each costing a mere $3.50. These firearms were subsequently sold to Union forces at a hefty profit, illustrating his willingness to capitalize on the nation's fractured state. Such maneuvers would cast a long shadow over his illustrious career, sculpting the narrative that painted him as a cold-hearted capitalist ready to profit from a nation torn asunder. Additionally, another noteworthy episode during the war occurred when J.P. Morgan's father received the crucial news of the fall of Vicksburg, before it was common knowledge in London's financial circles. Utilizing telegraph communications with his son John Pierpont in New York, Junius Spencer was alerted to this pivotal event in the American Civil War ahead of his competitors. Armed with this advance intelligence, the Morgans astutely seized the opportunity to buy up Union war bonds before their prices soared with the newfound optimism for the Union cause. This prescient move not only swelled their coffers, but also showcased the Morgan family's uncanny knack for exploiting real-time information, further consolidating their commanding presence in the intricate theater of finance. Such episodes, marred by ethical dilemmas yet undeniably shaping his path, contributed to the complex legacy that the early Morgans would leave behind. They reveal a group not just of immense influence and financial acumen, but also ones who tread the blurry line between opportunism and the darker facets of capitalism. Now, in 1871, J.P. Morgan's career took a monumental turn with the formation of Drexel, Morgan and Company, a venture with Philadelphia financier Anthony Joseph Drexel. Operating as an agent for European investments in the United States, the company played a pivotal role in reshaping the American economy, which until then had a robust market mainly for railroads and canals. To be clear, Drexel, Morgan and Company wasn't just successful, it was transformative, and it revitalized the American securities market and expanded the national capital market. But the company faced its fair share of controversies, often labeled as a symbol of greed and unchecked corporate power. However, at the dawn of the 20th century, John Pierpont Morgan found himself on the cusp of orchestrating what would become his financial masterstroke. Driven by an unquenchable thirst for consolidation and a vision of a streamlined, globally competitive American steel industry, Morgan aimed to achieve what no one before him had dared: the formation of the world's first billion-dollar corporation. The audacious venture took form as U.S. Steel, a behemoth birthed from the amalgamation of Federal Steel Company and Andrew Carnegie's Steel Leviathan. Morgan's strategic calculations were astute. By creating U.S. Steel, he sought to capture untapped economies of scale, thereby bolstering the competitiveness of American steel on the global stage. Indeed, the maneuvers he employed to pull this off were as complex as they were daring. Through skillful negotiations, a knack for understanding corporate value, and an unparalleled network of contacts, Morgan managed to convince key stakeholders that consolidation was the path to future profit and national prominence. Yet this monumental accomplishment did not escape scrutiny. Critics were quick to denounce U.S. Steel as a monopoly, a dominating force that not only sought to control steel production, but also aspired to wield undue influence over affiliated industries. Such aggressive labor policies and a voracious appetite for control fanned the flames of public debate. The controversy that enveloped U.S. Steel would echo in the chambers of policymakers, playing a significant role in shaping antitrust laws and labor rights for years to follow. Indeed, even as his titanic achievement with U.S. Steel stirred turbulent waters of public discourse and legislative apprehension, J.P. Morgan managed to sail relatively unscathed. His cultivated social prominence and intricate web of influential connections, interwoven with a nuanced understanding of legal boundaries, afforded him a buffer from the severest of societal and legal reprisals. However, after the monumental creation of U.S. Steel, Morgan would not rest on his laurels. He subsequently continued to be a dominant force in American finance, playing critical roles in stabilizing the U.S. economy during periods of financial panic. Notably, his intervention in the Panic of 1907 showcased his immense influence, as he personally orchestrated a bailout of sorts, convening with other titans of industry to prevent a broader economic collapse. Additionally, as a patron of the arts, he amassed an extensive collection, including rare books and manuscripts, further etching his influence on American culture. But as time wore on, Morgan began to prepare for the inevitable passing of the torch. Though he would never completely step away from the empire he had built, he started laying the groundwork for the next generation. His son, J.P. Morgan Jr., would therefore inherit not just a business but an entire ethos, a philosophy of financial influence, social prominence, and yes, the intricate dance with public scrutiny and legislative oversight. Now, each successive generation of Morgans made its own unique contributions to the family legacy. Born as the heir apparent, the aforementioned John Pierpont Morgan Jr., commonly known as Jack, attended prestigious institutions like St. Paul's School and Harvard College, before following in his father's footsteps in both finance and philanthropy. Later, Jack's high-stakes involvement in World War I would display an uncanny resemblance to his father's actions during the American Civil War. As his firm became the sole supplier of munitions for the Allies, he facilitated massive loans and supply agreements with the British and French governments, earning a staggering 1% commission on $3 billion. While these transactions significantly funded the war effort and brought him enormous prestige, they also attracted criticism. He was accused of influencing American foreign policy for personal gain. Specifically, Allegations suggested he pushed the US closer to joining the war to safeguard his extensive investments. Therefore, this duality of financial success, marred by ethical questioning, echoed his father's controversial business choices during the Civil War. Both men leveraged national conflict as a springboard for immense profit, and both faced public scrutiny for their willingness to capitalize on such grim circumstances. Furthermore, the Morgans were seminal in the founding of America's central bank, the Federal Reserve System, in 1913. After the aforementioned panic of 1907 revealed the fragility of the US financial system, J.P. Morgan Sr. played a key role in conceptualizing a centralized banking structure. The family's influence therefore pervaded the Federal Reserve's architecture, triggering debate over the extent to which private banking interests had molded public policy. Soon thereafter, the Great Depression wreaked havoc on John Pierpont Morgan Jr.'s financial empire, causing his assets to sharply decline from a staggering $704 million to a lesser $425 million. Adding fuel to the fire was the Senate's Pecora hearings in 1932, which served as a catalyst for public animosity against Wall Street titans, with Morgan Jr. becoming a symbol of a flawed and failing financial system. These hearings thereby crystallized the public's image of Morgan Jr. as someone who opportunistically profited during periods of economic hardship, further intensifying the scrutiny his family had long been under. Additionally, amidst this turbulent backdrop, Morgan Stanley was founded in 1935, conceived as a direct response to the Glass-Steagall Act, which mandated the separation of commercial and investment banking activities. The company was meant to carry on the Morgan family's investment banking operations. Specifically, Henry Sturgis Morgan, a grandson of J.P. Morgan, was among its co-founders. The inception of Morgan Stanley thus served a dual purpose. It not only complied with new federal regulations, but also provided a pathway for the Morgan legacy to adapt and persist in a drastically altered financial landscape. Therefore, the Morgan legacy wouldn't end with Jr., it would continue with his grandchildren, J.P. Morgan III and Henry Sturgis Morgan. United in their business acumen, they additionally fused two banking powerhouses, Morgan Guaranty Trust Company of New York and J.P. Morgan and Company, to birth Morgan Guaranty Trust, which swiftly ascended the ranks to become a dominant global financial institution. This institution found itself in a complex geopolitical web during the Cold War era. As Morgan Guaranty Trust was intricately tied to significant corporations, both within the United States and globally, it couldn't escape scrutiny. Questions over the bank's vast influence and the ethical considerations surrounding its global footprint became subjects of intense discussion. Rolling into the 1980s, the Morgan lineage widened its financial focus by venturing into diverse investment channels. Alongside, they amplified their charitable work through ventures like the Morgan Family Fund and the Morgan Library and Museum. These altruistic efforts could not fully silence lingering questions about the source of their colossal wealth, a scrutiny intensified by the family's by then 100-year involvement in wartime profiteering and strategic corporate maneuvering. Now, the turn of the millennium saw another milestone when J.P. Morgan and Company united with Chase Manhattan Corporation. This merger created a financial juggernaut, raising eyebrows around antitrust issues. Nevertheless, such concerns were eventually sidelined, allowing this new entity to consolidate its formidable status in global banking. As of the last few years, the Morgan family remains firmly rooted in the echelons of old money, albeit in a somewhat unexpected manner, and not always in a quiet wealth kind of fashion. One example includes John Adams Morgan, who tied the knot with fashion designer and reality TV star Sonia Morgan in 1998. They have a daughter, Quincy Adams Morgan, who has mostly been kept away from the public eye. However, pictures of her are easily found on social media. Quincy recently graduated summa cum laude from the University of Pennsylvania in 2023, before moving to Los Angeles to ostensibly find a new path. Simultaneously, keeping to the old money principle of intermarriage between noble families, there is actually an entire segment of the Morgan dynasty who are members of the British aristocracy. You see, Mary Lyman Morgan Burns, a sister of J.P. Morgan, had a daughter, Mary Ethel, who married into the illustrious Harcourt family by becoming Viscountess Harcourt in 1899. Indeed, the name Harcourt has been a fixture in British history, going as far back as the 1100s. Over the centuries, the Harcourt family has amassed considerable influence in various sectors, most notably in politics and diplomacy. Further cementing the Morgans' foray into British aristocracy, Cynthia Mary Burns, related to the family through Walter Spencer Morgan Burns, married Sir John Gawen Carew Pole, 12th Baronet, in 1928. The Pole baronetcy is additionally one of the oldest in England, with a lineage dating back to the early 1600s, with roots in both politics and military service. Therefore, the story of the Morgans is a fascinating odyssey, from humble maritime merchants to powerful financiers who shaped epochs, with tentacles reaching into the creation of America's financial infrastructure, intricate engagements in global conflicts, and connections to British aristocracy. Their influence is as complex as it is vast. And, as if to put a cherry on top, they've also become household names in the nation's most essential financial institutions. Thus, in many ways, the Morgans encapsulate the multifaceted dimensions of American financial and political history, embodying both the benefits and complications that come with immense power and wealth. At one point in American history, having a parent with the last name Vanderbilt was like getting a golden ticket to fame, fortune, and power. Indeed, for decades, the descendants of railroad magnate Cornelius Vanderbilt spent money like it was going out of style, including building the largest private home in America to this very day, the Biltmore Estate in North Carolina, and getting one of the country's most prestigious universities named after their family. However, the gilded aura that once shrouded the Vanderbilt name has gradually faded, revealing the burdens that come with such a storied legacy. By the 21st century, the dazzling excesses of the Vanderbilt past had given way to a more subdued presence, and despite having one of the most recognizable faces in news be a member of this legendary dynasty, most people on the streets of America would not know what became of the Vanderbilt legacy. In today's episode, we'll give you the deep dive and the secret history, taking you step by step through the past and the future of one of America's most iconic names as we describe what became of the final Vanderbilt heirs. Anderson Cooper seems to have cornered the market on both broadcasting and bank balances, with his 2024 endeavors stamping him as a titan of American journalism and a not-so-secret admirer of the finer things in life. With a reported $50 million net worth to his name, but pulling in a hefty $20 million from CNN annually, hinting at a much greater fortune, Anderson is not just riding the wave, he's making it. And when it comes to real estate, Anderson doesn't just own properties, he seems to collect them. From a grand $20 million mansion in Atlanta to a chic 5-bedroom New York City apartment snagged for $8 million, this man knows his bricks and mortar. Add to this a quirky former firehouse in the West Village and multiple retreats in Quogue, and it's clear the man has a knack for luxury digs. Not to forget, he zips around in a Gulfstream jet and sails a 50-foot yacht. Not exactly stuffy newsroom desk fare. Now, his professional notoriety remains undisputed as he helms CNN's Anderson Cooper 360 and The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper. And the man seems to dance between hard news and pop journalism with the ease of a seasoned samba dancer. Of course, what you're all really here for is the inheritance info, and it would seem Anderson's hand-me-down income is as robust as his broadcasting schedule. Beyond his salary, he inherited a nifty sum from his mother, the legendary heiress Gloria Vanderbilt, while the gossip mills churn out wildly varying figures ranging from $1.5 million to a staggering $135 million. Anderson himself chuckles at these speculations, known as he is for pinching pennies and happily outfitting his offspring in hand-me-downs. But the story of this final Vanderbilt deepens with a poignant twist. Anderson is the younger sibling of Carter Vanderbilt Cooper, the other last heir to the Vanderbilt estate. Born into a world of wealth and privilege, the brothers grew up in the lap of luxury on Manhattan's Upper East Side, enjoying panoramic views that most can only dream of. Tragedy, however, has been a recurring theme in their lives, echoing the melancholic undertones of their mother's own early experiences, and it seems even a Vanderbilt must pay his dues to the fates. In the next chapter, we'll give the broader context of exactly what it would have been like to grow up as the final heirs in one of America's most legendary dynasties, before getting into the nitty-gritty of the modern Vanderbilt story of wealth and woe. Cornelius Vanderbilt, great-great-grandfather to media personality Anderson Cooper and his late brother Carter Cooper, epitomizes the quintessential American rags-to-riches story. Born to a modest family in New York City, Vanderbilt propelled himself from ferry operator to titan of the transportation industry, amassing wealth that established the Vanderbilt family as symbols of American affluence and power. And starting as a young man, Vanderbilt gained a reputation for his unyielding reliability and spirited courage while working on ferries. His ambitious nature soon led him into the steamboat industry, where he cleverly sidestepped monopolies and offered cutthroat prices that outmaneuvered his competitors. This strategy not only ballooned his operations, but by the late 1840s, his fleet swelled to over 100 steamboats, marking his venture as the largest business in the United States at that time. Not one to rest on his laurels, Vanderbilt shifted his focus to the burgeoning railroad industry. And through strategic acquisitions such as the New York and Harlem Railroad, Hudson River Railroad, and Central Railroad, he crafted an expansive transportation network that rivaled any in the nation. His relentless approach to business earned him the moniker the Commodore, and by his death in 1877, Vanderbilt had accumulated a fortune estimated at $95 million, equal to over $140 billion today, making him the wealthiest man in the country at his death, even outpacing the remaining Rockefellers. And the Vanderbilt legacy of grandeur persisted well beyond Cornelius's era. His children invested their inherited fortunes into constructing opulent mansions along New York City's Fifth Avenue, extravagant summer retreats in Newport, Rhode Island, and the majestic Biltmore House in Asheville, North Carolina, still the largest private home in America, even in 2024. Yet, beyond their architectural contributions, the family also embraced philanthropy. And Cornelius himself initiated this tradition by endowing $1 million to found Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. Therefore, it is from this lineage of prosperity and philanthropy that Anderson Cooper and his brother Carter descend. And yet, their own mother from her earliest days was embroiled in her own bit of Vanderbilt drama. You see, the struggles began following the death of Reginald Vanderbilt, Gloria Morgan's first husband, and father to young Gloria Vanderbilt, and his demise in 1925 triggered a notorious custody battle over their daughter and her substantial $5 million trust fund, equal to over $80 million in today's dollars. The dispute thus pitted Gloria Morgan Vanderbilt against her sister-in-law Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, encapsulating the public's fascination with the Vanderbilt family's private lives. Dubbed the trial of the century, this high-profile legal saga unfolded during the depths of the Great Depression, casting a stark light on the lives of the ultra-wealthy. Accusations flew thick and fast in the courtroom, painting Gloria Morgan Vanderbilt as a socialite more devoted to her European jaunts than to her maternal duties. Gertrude Whitney, who had been acting as the young Gloria's guardian at her lavish New York estate, ultimately won custody, relegating Gloria Morgan to mere visitation rights. But the trial left an unforgettable mark on how Gloria Vanderbilt perceived her own mother. As a beautiful stranger, she only saw occasionally. Despite these rocky beginnings, Gloria Vanderbilt carved out her own notable path, turning her talents to the worlds of art, fashion, and literature. Her foray into the fashion industry, particularly her pioneering line of designer jeans in the 1970s, catapulted her to new heights of commercial success. And in 1980, at the height of her brand's popularity, she pocketed an impressive $10 million from royalties alone, an amount equivalent to more than $30 million today. But the romance between Gloria Vanderbilt and Wyatt Emery Cooper, Anderson and Cooper's father, is also a key aspect of the journey to understanding the final Vanderbilt heirs. Gloria and Wyatt first crossed paths at a New York City dinner party in the early 1960s, where Gloria was immediately taken with Wyatt's striking blue eyes, and she described their first meeting as a shock of recognition, a moment that sparked an immediate connection. You see, at this juncture, Gloria was a famed socialite and fashion innovator, while Wyatt had carved out his niche as a gifted writer and actor with roots in the Deep South. Despite their disparate backgrounds, Gloria from the opulent Vanderbilt dynasty and Wyatt from a humble Mississippi upbringing, they discovered mutual interests and values that drew them together. As their relationship blossomed, Gloria found herself enchanted by Wyatt's integrity and deeply ingrained values. His large, affectionate family offered her a window into a nurturing family environment she had never experienced, due to her own chaotic upbringing. And this insight was instrumental in her decision that Wyatt was the ideal partner with whom to build a family. Wyatt, in turn, was captivated by Gloria. He saw past her public persona to her artistic prowess and her longing for an authentic family life. Furthermore, their romance was enriched by their joint involvement in New York's vibrant arts scene, weaving their personal and professional lives into a shared tapestry. The couple's commitment culminated in marriage on Christmas Eve, 1963, and for Gloria, who had already experienced 3 previous marriages, Wyatt was the definitive love of her life. This marriage heralded a new chapter, providing the stability and family life she had earnestly sought. Gloria and Wyatt swiftly became staples of New York's elite social scene, regularly gracing national best-dressed lists. Yet, their relationship was built on more than just appearances. Wyatt's emotional support and empathy offered Gloria something she had found lacking in earlier relationships, and together they would cultivate the family life Gloria had envisioned. Soon, they would raise Gloria's 2 sons from her previous marriage to Leopold Stokowski and welcome 2 more children, Carter and Anderson Cooper. From their earliest days, the Cooper brothers were steeped in luxury. Icons like Diane Arbus were behind the camera capturing their infant giggles, and Anderson even snagged a gig on The Tonight Show at the tender age of 3. Luxury homes, flights on private jets, and rubbing elbows with the elite were regular fixtures in their childhood tapestry. Yet, this gilded life came with its own set of hurdles. Tragedy first struck when Anderson was 10. His father, Wyatt, succumbed to heart disease, leaving a lasting mark on the family, and both brothers were academic stars. Anderson polished off his prep education at Manhattan's Dalton School, dashing through the curriculum to graduate at 17. He then sprinted to Yale, dove into political science, and even steered the lightweight rowing team as coxswain, bagging his degree in 1989. Carter, on the other hand, was enchanted by military history and politics from a young age. Described by Anderson as more sensitive and less cut out for the social fray, Carter's interests were profound, yet his demeanor gentle. Thus, the bond between the brothers was intricate, laced with the usual sibling dynamics, yet defined by a shared experience of public scrutiny and personal trials. For example, Anderson held Carter's book Families in high regard, viewing it as a roadmap their father might have endorsed for their lives. After his graduation from Princeton in 1987, Carter delved into the world of historical literature, contributing reviews and edits to American Heritage magazine. Personal struggles, however, shadowed Carter. He battled severe allergies and harbored a peculiar fear of anesthetics, speaking to his desire to live fully and consciously. Tragically, a new asthma inhaler prescribed months before his untimely death was later thought by their mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, to have triggered a fatal psychotic episode. On the 22nd July 1988, at the age of 23, Carter ended his time on Earth by jumping from the terrace of his family's 14th-story apartment in New York City with his mother as a helpless spectator. Her pleas for him to step back from the precipice went unheeded, leaving a scar that would persist through the decades. And the void left by Carter's demise wove a new fabric of unity between Anderson and Gloria. Amidst the profound grief, Anderson became a pillar of support, offering solace and strength to his mother. Gloria, haunted yet resilient, found ways to keep her son's memory vibrant, engaging in conversations that breathed life into his past presence, and her literary tribute to Carter, A Mother's Story, captures the excruciating pain of that loss and its everlasting imprint on her life. Through these trials, the threads of familial love and collective memory stitch together a tapestry of shared resilience and mutual support, highlighting a journey through loss and the continuous search for solace and understanding in its aftermath. In the wake of personal catastrophe, Anderson Cooper and his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, leaned heavily on one another, and the ripple effects of Carter's untimely departure profoundly shaped Anderson's professional path and personal ethos. He openly credits his brother's death as a pivotal force driving him toward journalism, a field where he frequently tackles themes of loss, resilience, and the human spirit's indomitable capacity to recover. While covering global adversities, Anderson found a way to process his own heartaches, though the sorrow of his brother's absence remains a constant companion. And the death of Gloria Vanderbilt at 95, due to stomach cancer, marked another chapter of loss in Cooper's life. Thus, despite his accomplishments and professional standing, Anderson Cooper has always been candid about his personal struggles with grief. This openness led him to launch All There Is in 2022, a podcast exploring the multifaceted nature of grief and its profound impact on those it afflicts. The podcast has resonated deeply, creating a community for individuals navigating similar pathways of loss, offering both solace and shared understanding. In more personal realms, joy has blossomed for Cooper in recent years, particularly in his role as a father to his two sons, Wyatt and Sebastian, whom he shares with his former partner, Benjamin Messani. Embracing fatherhood, Cooper is dedicated to nurturing his children's interests and bolstering their pursuits, a commitment he attributes to the values instilled in him during his upbringing. And although Anderson Cooper initially distanced himself from the Vanderbilt name, wary of being overshadowed by the monumental family legacy, as he embraced fatherhood, his perspective shifted dramatically. This change sparked a deep dive into the complexities of his ancestry, culminating in his authorship of the best-selling book, Vanderbilt, The Rise and Fall of an American Dynasty. With that said, it's important to note that there are indeed two additional Vanderbilt heirs, Leopold Stanislaus Stan Stokowski and Christopher Stokowski, sons of Gloria Vanderbilt from her first marriage. Both of these men, however, have seemingly taken steps to distance themselves from the Vanderbilt brand, and it appears their children will likely grow up detached from the Vanderbilt identity and wealth. Leopold Stanislaus, born in 1950, has forged a substantial career in landscaping and is married to Emily Goldstein. They have two daughters, and although Stan maintained a close relationship with his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, he and his family have taken great steps to stay almost completely out of the public eye. On the other hand, Christopher Stokowski, born in 1952, has taken a markedly different path. A classical musician by profession who was previously engaged to one April Sandmeyer, he remained single and was estranged from his family for many years before eventually reconciling. Despite this reconciliation, Christopher inherited nothing from the Vanderbilt wealth, speaking to his prolonged detachment from the family. The divergent paths of the Stokowski and Cooper brothers illustrate vividly how the Vanderbilt legacy can sculpt individual fates in dramatically different manners. Each brother's life story reveals the range of ways family members can navigate the weighty expectations and pressures associated with such a renowned lineage, demonstrating the delicate dance between personal identity and familial legacy. For much of the 19th and 20th centuries, having an Astor in your family tree was like having a passport to the upper echelons of American society. Indeed, even today, you can find traces of the Astor name adorned on some of the cornerstones of culture in the United States. You can spend a few days lounging luxuriously at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, grab a coffee in the morning in Bryant Park, next to the Astor-constructed New York Public Library, and enjoy a sumptuous meal at a swanky restaurant on Astor Place in Lower Manhattan. And yet behind the polished veneer of their historic legacy lies a story of division and disparity. As the mammoth Astor fortune split into two distinct branches on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, the contrast between the thriving and the struggling descendants has become striking. On one side, the 21st century Astors revel in a world of continued political and financial influence, their lives a vibrant perpetuation of their storied past. Meanwhile, across the ocean, some descendants face a tragic reversal, growing up in relative poverty, according to them, and picking up the pieces of life in their words, cash-poor struggle. In today's episode, we'll give you the full, unedited saga of life in the 21st century as a member of the original old money family of the transatlantic jet set, exposing the good, the bad, and the luxury, as we describe, what happened to the remaining Astor family heirs. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of exactly where the 21st century Astor descendants are today, we have to give a bit of context, since this family is, these days, uniquely positioned on two sides of the Atlantic Ocean, in the United Kingdom and the United States. Even more interestingly, the family itself first started in neither of these countries. You see, John Jacob Astor, the first patriarch of this financial dynasty, bid adieu to his native German countryside and set foot on American soil in 1783 with little more than a dream and a penchant for fur. Thus, his subsequent early ventures into the fur trade not only padded his pockets, but also sharpened his business instincts, paving his path towards real estate and various other lucrative enterprises. By the end of his days in 1848, John Jacob had forever written his name in the pages of history as America's first multimillionaire, and the baton of wealth was then passed on to his offspring, who were no slouches in amplifying this burgeoning fortune. William Backhouse Astor Sr., his son and successor, took to the New York real estate market like a duck to water, further bloating the family coffers. But the family's affluence wasn't just confined to business ledger sheets, they were also a fixture in the high society pages, with iconic women in the family, such as the legendary Mrs. Caroline Schermerhorn Astor, arguably creating the old money versus new money framing we still use today. Yet, as the Astors' fame and wealth cemented them as American royalty, they simultaneously began to stitch their family fabric with that of British nobility through strategic intermarriage, thus beginning the split branches of the modern Astor family we'll be discussing today. Indeed, in a Gilded Age marriage market as opulent as their lifestyles, the Astors and their ilk found matrimonial matches across the Atlantic, embedding themselves into the British aristocracy. But this trend was hardly an Astor-only thing. Numerous American heiresses, the so-called dollar princesses, crossed the ocean to marry cash-strapped but title-rich British aristocrats. And often, these unions were less about romantic moonlight and roses, and more about cold, hard cash and social ladders. Take Consuelo Vanderbilt, for instance, who in 1895 found herself the Duchess of Marlborough, not so much through a whirlwind romance, but thanks to her hefty dowry, which propped up the sagging fortunes of Blenheim Palace. In fact, it is through this infusion of Vanderbilt funds that, arguably, Britain was lucky enough to have none other than Sir Winston Churchill as Prime Minister. You see, Churchill himself was in Blenheim in 1874, grandchild to the 7th Duke and cousin to Consuelo's Duke. Quickly, Consuelo Vanderbilt herself and young Winston developed a deep camaraderie, and amidst the opulent yet stifling social life of the American heiress's aristocratic duties, Consuelo found a genuine friend in Churchill. Winston often visited Blenheim Palace, and Consuelo found solace in his companionship, especially through the strains of an arranged marriage. However, more consequentially to our discussion, Consuelo's marriage produced 2 sons, ensuring that Winston Churchill did not become the Duke of Marlborough, and allowing him the freedom to focus on his political career. Despite her eventual separation and divorce from the Duke, Consuelo and Churchill remained friends, and she continued to be a part of his social circle. Thus, Consuelo Vanderbilt's marriage to the Duke of Marlborough not only directly impacted the history of wealthy Americans marrying into the British aristocracy, but freed up the war-torn Brits to have their most legendary Prime Minister ever. It is therefore within this broader context that the Astors continued to thrive on both sides of the Atlantic. For example, William Waldorf Astor waved goodbye to the New World in 1890, donned the cap of British nobility, and bagged the title of the first Viscount Astor. Even the tragic demise of John Jacob Astor IV on the Titanic in 1912 did little to sink the family's influence. If anything, it marked a new chapter where the American and British branches of the family pursued their own distinct legacies. In America, Vincent Astor, the inheritor of the Astor estate post-Titanic, took up the philanthropic mantle, leaving his mark on New York City's skyline and social fabric. His death in 1959, however, dimmed the family's luminary status in America. Meanwhile, across the pond, the British Astors were having a bit of a renaissance, as we'll see in a minute. With that larger backstory in our grasp, we can now begin our update on the 21st century Astors on both sides of the Atlantic And towards the end, you're in for a bit of a surprise, for the Astor bloodline even extends all the way to the frosty lands of Russia. With that all said, let us begin our journey with the more well-known and influential remaining Astors, currently helmed in the United Kingdom. First, within the gilded corridors of British aristocracy, William Astor, the fourth Viscount Astor, navigates his role as a conservative hereditary Lord Temporal with a blend of charm and controversy. Born in 1951, his tenure in the House of Lords is a mix of old-school grace and occasional eyebrow-raising maneuvers. And Astor's political and business acumen have earned him respect, but not without criticism. The whispers of antiquated privilege follow him closely, especially with King Charles III's recent efforts to modernize the peerage system, raising questions as recently as this year about whether Astor will resist or adapt to these evolving aristocratic norms. Furthermore, in classic family fashion, the fourth Viscount Astor merged two powerful lineages when he married to Annabel Lucy Veronica Jones in 1976. Annabel, previously married to a baronet, brought her daughter Samantha into the Astor family, intertwining their heritage with British politics through Samantha's marriage to former Prime Minister David Cameron. And although the question arises whether Viscount Astor offers political advice during family meals, or merely enjoys the company, the marriage certainly speaks to the continuing influence of the family, as an Astor is also the stepfather of a recent Prime Minister. Now, Astor and Annabel's children, Flora Catherine, William Waldorf IV, and James Jacob Jake, each engage with their aristocratic legacy in distinct ways, all continuing the Astor name over in Britain through the millennial generation. Flora maintains a low profile, focusing on her family. Will navigates the expectations of inheritance while looking ahead, and Jake balances tradition with forging his own path. Our second major British Astor patriarch is none other than John Jacob "Johnny" Astor, the eighth, 3rd Baron Astor of Hever, born in 1946. Educated at Eton College and with a background in the Life Guards, his early experiences spanned from London to Malaysia and Hong Kong, and his political career gained prominence after the House of Lords Act of 1999, which reduced the hereditary peers but allowed him to retain his seat. As Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the Ministry of Defence from 2010 to 2015, he demonstrated his capability beyond ceremonial roles. But it was his son and heir apparent, Charles Gavin John Astor, joining in marriage with Princess Eliane Marie Ghislain de Merode of Belgium in June 2017 that was a fairy tale event at Hever Castle, adding a royal dimension to the Astor lineage. Princess Eliane, daughter of Prince Leonel and Countess Regine of Liedekerk, introduced a continental flair, enhancing the Astor family's aristocratic credentials. And their children, Astrid Henriette Elizabeth, born in 2020, and Lily Rose, born in 2023, signify a continued blending of historic and influential lines, as well as being notable Generation Alpha members of the Astor family. Furthermore, the fourth Viscount's grandson, Charles John Astor, known as Charlie or Sharky, and born in 1982, represents a youthful side of the current family. A great-great-grandson of William Waldorf Astor, Charlie's media spotlight was notably due to his past romantic link with Pippa Middleton. Besides media attention, he co-runs Sharky and George, a children's entertainment company with high-profile clientele, and holds a Guinness World Record for a pantomime horse, reflecting his whimsical side. And then there's Rose Nancy Langhorne Astor, daughter of David Astor of Jupiter Asset Management and Classic FM, further reinforces the Astor family's elite status through her marriage to Hugh Van Cutsem. You see, the Van Cutsem family has long been preeminent in British high society, with deep ties to the British Crown. For example, Hugh Van Cutsem's father, Hugh Bernard Edward Van Cutsem, was a close friend of King Charles III, a relationship that began during their university days at Cambridge, and this connection has been maintained across generations. Furthermore, their daughter, Grace Emily Clare Van Cutsem, notably served as a bridesmaid at Prince William and Kate Middleton's royal wedding in 2011. And Grace, who is also the goddaughter of Prince William, became a memorable figure at the event, famously dubbed the Grumpy Bridesmaid due to her forlorn expression during the couple's balcony kiss. But we would be remiss to not also mention Harry Marcus George Lopes, born into the Astor and Lopes families embodying notable heritage and connections. His family's distinguished history includes ancestors such as Massey Lopes, 2nd Baron Roberot, and Sephardi Jews like Judah Manasseh Lopes. Harry's marriage to Laura Rose Parker Bowles, daughter of Andrew Parker Bowles and the current Queen Camilla, introduces another royal dimension to the current British Astors. Therefore, as you can see, the Astors on Albion are moving from strength to strength, interweaving their bloodlines with the very peak of British influence and popping out heirs like it's going out of style. However, lest we forget, the Astor name really got its footing over in the homeland of our colonial cousins, the US of A. To start off, let's first mention an American Astor in-law who only recently passed away, but held immense influence in high society, but also had a child who brought a bit of infamy to the extended family. You see, it all starts with the stepfather of Brooke Astor, William Vincent Astor, an American businessman and philanthropist who was born as the elder child of the legendary John Jacob Astor IV and wealthy heiress Ava Lowell Willing. Young Vincent's life took a dramatic turn in 1912 when his father died on the Titanic, leaving Vincent with an enormous fortune and making him one of the wealthiest individuals of his time. After serving valiantly in World War I, Vincent became chairman and chief stockholder of Newsweek magazine in 1937, when the magazine was based in the iconic Knickerbocker building, a structure his father had built. Vincent remained its principal owner until his death in 1959, before the Washington Post Company acquired a controlling stake in Newsweek from the Vincent Astor Foundation for $8 million in 1961. Interestingly, family biographer Derek Wilson described Vincent Astor as a unique figure in America, a wealthy Astor with a profound social conscience. For instance, at 20, after inheriting his fortune, Vincent left Harvard University and sought to reshape the family's image from aloof slum landlords to socially conscious benefactors. Now, in October 1953, Vincent married one Roberta Brooke Russell, a twice-married woman who became a prominent philanthropist, socialite, and author. Born on the 30th of March 1902, Brooke Astor's early life, influenced by her father's military career, fostered her love for art and literature, and her education, though unconventional, set the stage for her future achievements. Then, she first married J. Dryden Cuser at 16, entered influential circles, and began her literary career. After their divorce in 1930, she moved to New York City, where she excelled in philanthropy and writing, and her second marriage to Charles Marshall in 1932 expanded her global travels and literary work. But it was Brooke's marriage to Vincent Astor in 1953 that positioned her at the forefront of philanthropy, as she led the Vincent Astor Foundation and directed around $195 million to charitable causes. Her contributions earned her significant honors, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom and the National Medal of Arts. And, although not being technically of Astor stock, adding a continuing sheen of prestige to her in-laws' family name well into the late 20th century. Additionally, she authored novels and autobiographies reflecting her lifestyle and values, but her later years were tainted by scandal involving her son, Anthony Dryden Marshall. You see, Anthony Dryden Marshall, born in 1924, was Brooke's only child with J. Dryden Cuser, and his varied career included roles as a Marine Corps officer, U.S. consul, ambassador, CIA officer, and Broadway producer. However, his life was marred by scandal when his son Philip accused him of mistreating and exploiting Brooke. The ensuing trial revealed troubling details, leading to Marshall's conviction for grand larceny and conspiracy. Therefore, Marshall's personal life, including 3 challenging marriages, further complicated his mother's legacy, however briefly. Yet Brooke Astor must be noted in our discussion as perhaps the most notable American in-law in recent years. But parallel to Marshall's story is that of Ivan Sergeyevich Obolensky, a direct descendant of Titanic's John Jacob Astor IV, born in May 1925 in London. As we promised in the beginning, this is the Russian connection, if you will, for the Astor lineage. You see, Ivan's father, Prince Sergei Platonovich Obolensky, was a notable figure whose life story reads like a historical novel. Born in 1890 in Tsarskoye Selo, Russia, Sergei was part of the illustrious Obolensky family, which traced its lineage back to the Rurikid rulers of Kievan Rus, predating the Romanov emperors. In other words, one could argue that Ivan comes from the founding stock of modern Russia, along with being an actual Astor descendant. Therefore, Igor's father's early life was marked by the grandeur of Tsarist Russian society. He was educated at Oxford University, where he played polo and joined the exclusive Bullingdon Club. However, his life took a dramatic turn during the Russian Revolution, and as a cavalry officer, he fought against the Bolsheviks and eventually fled Russia, escaping the chaos that ensued. After leaving Russia, Sergei married one Ava Alice Muriel Astor, Igor's mother, the daughter of John Jacob Astor IV in 1924, consequently creating a marriage that symbolized the union of Russian nobility with American high society. Sergei himself later became an American entrepreneur and served as vice chairman of Hilton Hotels Corporation. In addition, he had a distinguished military career, serving as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. paratroopers during World War II and working with the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. Furthermore, following in the Astor legacy, Ivan's career itself was distinguished, including co-founding the publishing house McDowell Obolensky Incorporated, which published James Agee's Pulitzer Prize-winning A Death in the Family. He married Claire Elizabeth McGinnis in 1949, fathering 3 children, living Astor descendants, before divorcing in 1956. And his second marriage to Mary Elizabeth Morris in 1959 produced another son, yet another direct descendant as well. But perhaps it is Alexandra Aldrich, the 5th great-granddaughter of John Jacob Astor, who has added the most intrigue to the American Astor lineage in the last 5 years. You see, by the time of her upbringing in the 1980s, for Alexandra, the golden era of the American Astors had long since faded, leaving behind only echoes of past grandeur within the walls of Rokeby, the family's 43-room estate in Barrytown, New York.
Everyone in my neighborhood assumed that we were aristocrats and wealthy because I was raised in a mansion, and I really grew up extremely poor.
And this once majestic mansion, a pinnacle of American Gothic architecture, had devolved into a crumbling monument to lost wealth and neglected heritage. Thus, in her eyes, Rokeby served as both playground and prison for young Alexandra. And this once majestic mansion, a pinnacle of American Gothic architecture, had devolved into a crumbling monument to lost wealth and neglected heritage. On one hand, the sprawling 420-acre property, complete with woods and outbuildings, offered ample space for childhood adventures. However, the mansion itself told a different story, and its 40-foot-long hallways, adorned with heirlooms and opulent furnishings, led to rooms filled with dust-covered antiques and the unmistakable scent of decay. Furthermore, Alexandra's parents, particularly her father Ricky, played a significant role in shaping her unconventional childhood. Ricky, despite his Harvard education and privileged background, worked as Rokeby's unpaid handyman. According to her, his strong sense of entitlement clashed with the family's financial reality, resulting in a household where TV dinners discarded by a nearby pie factory often served as meals. It was therefore within these halls that Alexandra penned The Astor Orphan, a memoir that peeled back the veneer of wealth to reveal a tableau of dysfunction and financial precarity. Published in 2013, The Astor Orphan offers a window into an upbringing defined by contrasts. The estate, though grand in scale and rich in history, was shackled by financial limitations so severe that the family was often described as land-rich but cash-poor. Alexandra's narrative is not one of lavish soirees and silk gowns, but of a 10-year-old navigating a labyrinth of familial chaos, with an unemployed father and a grandmother mired in alcoholism. Her account, lauded for its stark honesty, presents a family fractured yet clinging to the vestiges of a distinguished name. And thus, in a way, we see a tale of two families within the living Astor descendants. In the United Kingdom, we have a thriving, prosperous and bountiful branch, intermarrying and creating a much longer bloodline. The American Astors, however, have had a bit of a mixed bag, teetering between maintaining an opulent lifestyle with a storied name and on the brink of financial ruin. In a grand study awash with flickering shadows, Andrew Carnegie sits at a dark mahogany desk. The room is nearly dark, save for the small circle of light cast by an ornate oil lamp. The year is 1889, and outside the window the Pittsburgh steel mills are ablaze, lighting up the night sky like the stars glimmering above the Scotsman's palatial estate. However, inside, a different kind of inferno burns. It is the fire of an idea that will change the course of American history. With a clenched jaw and eyes gleaming with resolve, Carnegie leans forward, gripping his quill as if it were a sword. As he scribbles intently, he hesitates suddenly, feeling the weight of the next sentence. After taking in a deep, reflective breath, the magnate finally writes his declaration for the ages. The man who dies rich dies disgraced. Relieved, Carnegie puts down his pen, contemplating the magnitude of the words he has just committed to paper. It is indeed a declaration that will reverberate through generations, shaking the foundations of American capitalism. Now, in our 21st century economic climate, the concept of old money signifies not just wealth, but the enduring legacy of families who have maintained and even greatly expanded their fortunes for generations. But what happens when a family intentionally breaks this cycle of generational wealth and gives away their billions on purpose, thus consciously pushing their status back down to the middle class? In this episode of Old Money Luxury, we will explore this exact enigma. Guided by the ideology of their patriarch, Andrew Carnegie, the Carnegie family went from amassing a colossal fortune that, for a time, crowned him the world's richest man, to strategically giving away more than $5.6 billion in today's currency. With that mystifying prelude as a backdrop, join us as we now recount the entire saga and describe how the Carnegies went from old money to no money. Our journey first begins on the misty lanes of Dunfermline, Scotland, where Andrew Carnegie first saw the light of day in 1835. Born to no ordinary family, young Andrew's lineage was steeped in the humble craft of weaving, a tradition nourished by his father, William Carnegie, and his paternal grandfather. The maternal side of his family tree branched off in a different direction. Andrew's mother, Margaret Morrison Carnegie, hailed from a line deeply involved in tanning and shoemaking. However, she was not merely a homemaker, but rather the daughter of George Lauder, a political stalwart who ensured young Andrew's mind was sparked by the heroics of Scottish legends like Robert the Bruce, Rob Roy, and William Wallace. The Carnegie family's daily life was framed by the quaintness of their weaver's cottage and the looming presence of the Industrial Revolution, a transformative period that remodeled Scotland's social fabric and economic vitality. Dunfermline itself was a hub of textile manufacturing, but the family's fortunes dimmed as factory systems replaced traditional handlooms. This decline subjected weavers like William Carnegie to financial hardships, casting shadows of poverty over their lives. Yet, William was not just a weaver caught in the crossfire of industrialization. He was a passionate advocate of the Chartist movement, which called for broad political and social reforms. On the other side, Margaret Morrison Carnegie's family was also politically active, adding another layer to Andrew's inherent views on social responsibility. But how did the teenaged Andrew navigate through a world shifting under his feet? The answer lies in his relentless pursuit of self-education. Formal schooling took a back seat as Andrew leaned into books and night school, supported by a family tradition that valued intellectual rigor and political activism. Libraries became his sanctuaries, thanks to Uncle George's introductions to literary masterpieces and historical narratives. These early experiences seeded his lifelong love for libraries and a philanthropic fervor to construct these reservoirs of knowledge across English-speaking countries. But Scotland's Industrial Revolution would soon not just alter the nation's economy, it would birth complex societal structures, trigger urban migration, and lead to governmental reforms. Amidst this tumult, it became clear that the Carnegie family needed to seek greener pastures. And to that, the burgeoning magnetic allure of the American dream, the notion that in the United States you can make it big through sheer grit and enterprise. And we arrive at the year 1848, when the Carnegies decide to pack up their hopes and dreams, cross the Atlantic, and settle in Allegheny City, Pennsylvania. Here, they would hope to find not just economic sustenance, but a stage upon which young Andrew could shape his indomitable destiny. Now, the Carnegie family had deliberately chosen Allegheny, the budding industrial suburb of Pittsburgh, for its abundant economic prospects. During this period, in the mid-19th century, America was a crucible of change, fueled by manifest destiny and the California gold rush of 1849. The nation itself was also on the cusp of an industrial revolution, transitioning from agricultural simplicity to industrial complexity. Allegheny specifically was a mosaic of diverse communities, including Germans and Croats, and offered a plethora of job opportunities in sectors like commercial trading, meatpacking, and leather tanning. However, despite these favorable conditions, the Carnegies faced initial hardships. William Carnegie's weaving business faltered, forcing 13-year-old Andrew into the laborious role of a bobbin boy in a cotton mill, where he would work 72-hour weeks for a modest $1.20 per hour, roughly $168 a month in today's currency. But not one to be confined by menial tasks, Andrew navigated through a series of roles that laid the foundation for his later empire. Positions such as messenger, secretary, and telegraph operator for the Pennsylvania Railroad served as an informal education in corporate structure and strategy. His affiliation with the railroad industry was particularly instructive. It offered lessons in management and cost optimization, as well as invaluable connections with industry giants like Thomas A. Scott and J. Edgar Thompson. These associations helped Carnegie secure early ventures like the Keystone Bridge Company, critical to the railway infrastructure. Subsequently, the Civil War amplified Carnegie's already diversifying portfolio, especially with his stake in the Columbia Oil Company. The conflict skyrocketed demand for both iron and oil, boosting his profits. Although eligible for military service, he opted to pay a substitute $850, or roughly 20,000 modern dollars, to enlist in his stead, a common practice among the affluent. And by the early 1870s, Carnegie had diversified his investments across a broad spectrum. His real breakthrough came in 1873, with the recognition of steel's untapped potential. Notably, he initiated the construction of the Edgar Thompson Works in Braddock, Pennsylvania, a groundbreaking facility introducing the Bessemer steelmaking process to America. Costing an estimated $1.2 million, or roughly $30 million in modern currency, the mill was a high-stakes bet on an unproven sector. Yet the gamble yielded significant dividends, as the facility didn't just elevate steel production standards, it fundamentally altered the fabric of American industry. In the years following, Carnegie further expanded and integrated his business holdings, including significant assets like the Scotia ore mines, Union iron mills, and Lucy furnaces. This methodical combination of resources and production capacities set the stage for the emergence of the powerhouse that became Carnegie Steel Company in 1889. Now, by the dawn of the 1890s, Andrew Carnegie was firmly established as an industrial colossus, presiding over a domain that extended well beyond the furnaces of his steel operations. His Carnegie Steel Company was the bedrock of global steel production, redefining benchmarks for both efficiency and profit. During his financial peak, Carnegie was an indomitable force in American enterprise, amassing his immense wealth chiefly through steel production endeavors. His holdings were extensive, comprising a diverse array of investments from lucrative real estate to varied business ventures. One significant acquisition was Scotland's Skibo Castle in 1899, which he transformed into a tranquil retreat, far from the industrial hustle. You see, Carnegie's monumental success was rooted in two pillars: innovative techniques and shrewd business acumen. His playbook included various methods aimed at ensuring Carnegie Steel remained an industry leader. Vertical integration, strategic mergers, and an uncompromising attention to cost efficiency were among them. For example, vertical integration was foundational to his business approach. He took ownership of entities along different stages of the steel-making process, from iron ore mines to railway companies. This end-to-end control enabled him to dramatically lower production costs while simultaneously optimizing operations for greater efficiency. His expansionary ambitions were further realized through mergers and acquisitions, notably the union of assets with H.C. Frick and Company in 1892. This move fortified the Carnegie Steel Company, giving him greater leverage over both the marketplace and the supply chain. An unwavering dedication to operational efficiency led him to adopt the Bessemer process, significantly quickening steel production while driving down costs. This made steel more affordable and accessible, altering the American landscape by facilitating the construction of bridges, skyscrapers, and expansive railway systems. However, this zeal for efficiency occasionally came at the cost of labor welfare. The introduction of cutting-edge technology and methods often preceded adequate safety measures. This tension came to a head in the Homestead Strike of 1892, a violent skirmish between workers and management that resulted in 12 deaths and created an enduring fissure between labor and leadership. Henry Clay Frick, who was the muscle of Carnegie Steel at the time, instigated the conflict through wage reductions. While Carnegie was geographically removed, quietly waiting back in Scotland, he had empowered Frick to act unilaterally, leading to a violent standoff that left an indelible scar on his otherwise storied legacy. Indeed, this harrowing incident triggered a significant self-reckoning for Carnegie, ultimately inspiring his gospel of wealth philosophy. This ideological shift diverged markedly from his peers' prevailing perspectives, emphasizing not just the ownership, but also the ethical stewardship of wealth. Published initially in 1889, the thesis proposed that affluence carried a moral duty to benefit society at large. Transitioning from theory to action, Carnegie would subsequently channel his resources into philanthropy, laying the groundwork for educational institutions, public libraries, and other community-focused entities. However, his philanthropic masterstroke would first need an exit strategy from the rough-and-tumble business world of industrial-age America, and therefore he would need a powerful ally to help strategically guide him out of the corridors of ruthless Gilded Age finance. Now, at the turn of the 20th century, when the American steel industry was the backbone of a rapidly modernizing economy, legendary financier and Machiavellian businessman J.P. Morgan saw an unparalleled opportunity. Steel was not just a commodity, it was the lifeblood of industrializing cities, the burgeoning auto industry, and wartime production during World War I. By acquiring Carnegie Steel, Morgan could craft the United States Steel Corporation in his image, a monolithic entity that at the time was the world's largest company. This acquisition enabled Morgan to corner the steel market and exploit the soaring demand for this vital resource. Thus, the 1901 sale of Carnegie Steel to J.P. Morgan for an astonishing $480 million, equivalent to over $13 billion in today's money, was more than just a business transaction. It provided Andrew Carnegie with the financial muscle to massively escalate his philanthropic activities, in sync with his own moral guidelines encapsulated in his Gospel of Wealth. With this philosophy as his North Star and seemingly endless cash in the bank after the sale of his empire, Carnegie proclaimed that the affluent were morally obligated to disperse their wealth in their lifetime, and this sale armed him with the capital to make a transformative societal impact. Carnegie's subsequent largesse left an indelible mark on multiple sectors: education, peace initiatives, and scientific research, to name a few. Among his most enduring contributions were the Carnegie Libraries, a global network of more than 2,500 public libraries. Indeed, his advocacy for public libraries came at an opportune moment when the American public library system was in its nascent stage, meeting the growing need for accessible knowledge. Consequently, these libraries were a catalyst for education and self-improvement across diverse populations, and they ushered in a new era of knowledge democratization. Local communities soon became the financial pillars of these libraries, providing about 80% of public funding. Furthermore, Carnegie's focus on libraries spurred a ripple effect, inspiring other local philanthropists to invest in their communities. These libraries were not just buildings filled with books. They were innovation hubs that enriched their localities and continue to serve their communities today. Beyond libraries, Carnegie's financial legacy led to the founding of educational behemoths like Carnegie Mellon University, an institution renowned for its contributions to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Additionally, Carnegie Hall in New York City stands as an emblem of his patronage in the arts. This iconic concert venue has been a stage for countless musical legends and continues to uphold its reputation as an architectural and cultural jewel. However, the sale of Carnegie Steel also had ramifications for Carnegie's personal fortune. In keeping with his views on wealth dispersion, Carnegie systematically drained nearly all of his family's financial reservoirs. Now, in 1919, Andrew Carnegie's death led to a circumspect distribution of his considerable assets, personal belongings, a financial endowment, and real estate properties, among them a New York City townhouse and a Scottish vacation home. His spouse, Louise Whitfield Carnegie, a New York native, had encountered Andrew at the age of 23, thanks to her father. The two marked in 1887 at an intimate ceremony, subsequent to Louise signing a prenuptial contract that waived any future claim on Andrew's wealth. And Louise, frequently depicted as a person of kindness and moral caliber, had a prominent role in Andrew's altruistic pursuits as a board member of the Carnegie Corporation. Following Andrew's demise, she remained an active participant in the family's philanthropic ventures. Margaret Carnegie Miller, their sole child, inherited a modest trust fund, compelling the family to part with the Manhattan residence due to maintenance expenses. Born and raised in New York City, Margaret wed Roswell Miller Jr. in 1919. They had 4 offspring before their marriage disintegrated in 1953. Margaret served on the board of the Carnegie Corporation from 1934 until 1973 and remained an honorary trustee for life until her passing in 1990. Now, the 13 subsequent descendants of Andrew Carnegie have not accumulated billionaire status, but have thrived within the financial bracket of accomplished middle class to upper middle class professionals. Investments in diverse sectors like real estate and technology have been judiciously managed. Philanthropy, too, is an enduring family hallmark. William Thompson, a great-grandson, exemplifies this, having navigated personal setbacks, such as his mother Louise's polio, to perpetuate the family's charitable legacy. As former chair and honorary president of the Carnegie UK Trust, he oversaw the yearly allocation of £1 million to assorted causes. Admirably, in the 21st century era of intense public scrutiny and a mass media obsession with wealth, the Carnegies have kept impressively low profiles. Thorough internet searches on their lives reveal little. Social media platforms are devoid of family references, to the point where it's unlikely you'll find pictures of, or even the full names of, many living Carnegie family members. Such obscurity is indeed cultivated and cherished by this legendary clan, reflecting their old money ethos that prioritizes discretion over publicity. Where new money types may seek public affirmation through visible philanthropy or social media, the Carnegies exemplify different ethics. They have opted for a near-invisible public persona, contrasting sharply with the transparent lifestyles common among contemporary wealthy individuals. The preservation of privacy has thus become a family trait, and it adds another dimension to an already multifaceted family narrative. Andrew Carnegie was a public figure, but his heirs have largely retreated from the spotlight and the headlines, exemplifying a thoughtful navigation between the twin demands of affluence and social responsibility in today's world.